Ba-da-ba-ba, ba-da-ba-ba. All right. Promoter 101. 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 Promoter 101.
Hey Promoter 101, this is Toby Leighton Pope wishing you a happy 100th episode. Here's to 100 more. Go for it, guys.
It's the Promoter 101 100th episode All-Star Spectacular, hosted by Emporium's Dan Steinberg and Works Entertainment's W. Luke Pierce. Joining Steiny and Luke to celebrate this massive milestone are very special guests: Elliott Lefko, Rick Farrell, Scott Lesley, Ross Schilling, Dave Brooks, Joey Scoleri, Ant Taylor, Shep Gordon, Nick Storch, Danny Zelisko, Andrea Johnson, Andy Summers, Jamie Loeb, Sid Greenfeig, Wayne Forte, Lesley Olenik, Steve Martin, Stuart Ross, Darin Lashinsky, Jake Szufnarowski, Harlan Frey, Tom Ross, Peter Shapiro, Max Adler, Craig Newman, Jason Miller, Brian Penix, Seth Hurwitz, and Andrew Dreskin, with very special appearances by Toby Leighton Pope, Jason Kupferman, Mary Claire Borgelli, Lance Roberts, Jason Zink, Andy Gensler, Ollie Rosenblatt, Brian Hill, Paul Lohr, Brian Swanson, Ted Heinig, Jared Smith, and Jay Williams. Now, here's your hosts, Dan Steinberg and W. Luke Pierce.
Welcome one and all to the Promoter 101 100th episode All-Star Spectacular. We have some special guests, some messages, some storytelling. It's going to be a brand new episode. Everything is new, special just for this 100th episode. But first, let me introduce my partner in crime and co-host, Mr. W. Luke Pierce. Congrats, brother.
And a big congrats up to you as well, too, Dan. Excited for episode 100. Who would have thought it? The OCD and the ADD of all this is insane. Vegas definitely had the odds on this day never coming, as we were pretty much told by everyone else, too. So congratulations to you as well, my friend.
Wait, did you bet against us on this one, Luke?
Of course not, Dan. I would never short such a venture that we went into. And we don't have to get into all right now. Let's just jump into the amazing lineup of special guests we have on this, the 100th episode of Promoter 101.
All right, well, away we go.
This is Mary Claire Borgelli from Live Nation saying congratulations, Promoter 101. Best podcast in the music industry. Keep up the good work, guys.
The Promoter 101 podcast has so many friends, and we are blessed on this 100th episode with Goldenvoice's Elliott Lefko joining us. Welcome back to the podcast, Elliott.
Thanks, Dan. So happy to be here today.
It's an honor. Do you have something to share with us for this auspicious occasion?
Well, yeah, I do have a couple of stories to tell you, but first I'd like to say that I find there's three things in my life that I totally enjoy. The first thing, of course, is being with my family. The second is watching foreign films, a good Truffaut film or whatever. And the third thing is listening to your podcast.
Oh, I'm blushing. I think you're full of shit, but I'm totally blushing, and I love that.
Well, that's what we do, We always just tell stories and try to get people to do what we want them to do. That's part of being a good promoter. And it's like spinning a tale. It's like being Walt Disney or something. We spin tales, and it's a glorious world out there. It's like being in that ride at Disney World where they go, it's a wonderful world to be in this water in the car with my family. So here's my two stories that I want to say. And there was this movie once about Lenny Bruce, and he tells a story about how when people kind of get bad news, there's like 5 stages, like denial and anger, mourning, and tying your shoes and all this stuff. And being a promoter is kind of like that too. Like, I'm going to make $100,000 and then go on sale, and I'm going to make $50,000. And then I'm going to break even, and then I'm going to lose money. Cut all the costs, cut everything. Just let me only lose a little bit of money, please. I remember one time at a show, it wasn't even my show. It was losing so much money, and I just felt like people didn't know what they were doing. So I called up the caterer and said, cut the catering, just give them something. It wasn't even my show. And I go to the show later to check it out, and I see the singer, and he's Israeli, speaks Hebrew. I speak a little Hebrew too, and I go out to him, I go, Mani Shma. And he looks at me, and I don't even know if he knows that I was the guy who cut the catering or didn't cut the catering. He just looks at me, gives me like, that Israeli stare of death. It's so funny. And I was like, okay, no problem, dude. And then my next story is, there's this thing in promoting where should you do one show? Should you do two shows? So you wind up doing this thing called 1+1, where you agree you'll do two shows, you do one show, and then you'll see how it goes. And if it goes well, you'll add the second show. The only problem is you wrote it all out. So there's really 2 dates in the tour. And if you don't do that second show, the band's kind of stuck. What are they going to do? So there's always a thing like, when do you add the second show? And it's like, it never really works out. You add the second show, you get a half house, and all of a sudden, all the good times from the first show, it's all lost by having a terrible second show. And for me, the concrete example of that is when I was working on the Leonard Cohen tour and we were plotting all out, and I was working with some other people, and they said, because I'm not going to take the blame for this, they said, oh, let's do 2 shows in Toronto and 2 shows in Montreal. That's where he's from. It'll be huge. But these were like arenas, and there's a lot of bad seats, and none of the people are going to go sit in those seats. So we put it on sale, and sure enough, don't sell. And we add the second show, and you wind up like giving away the tickets and spending a bunch of money that you don't really want to. And it just takes, again, a really great thing into a terrible thing. So get to Toronto, I fly in for the show, and I see Leonard in the hotel hallway and from afar. And I know it's a bad situation. Everyone's kind of tense. And he sort of sees me. He gives me, again, like, bad. He looks at me like, fucked up, man. Oh, my God, And it's just like, I just felt so terrible. And I just kind of slinked away. And then fast forward, it's the end of the tour, and we're in New York and have one of those parties, and they're doing like Secret Santa. Everyone's all happy and it's all good. And I walk up to Leonard and go, hey, how's it going? What's up? And the tour was so good and everything. And kind of takes me aside and he just gives it to me like full blast. Like, see, he was so upset. He started yelling at me, like freaking out, just like, you really screwed me. There's 2 shows in Toronto. It's embarrassing. How could you do that? And again, like, he's my hero. So it's sort of like, it was bad enough, but then your hero's getting upset with you. And I just felt so bad. And it's like, I didn't say anything, of course. This is like, let him rant and let him say everything. And I just agree. I don't say anything. And then it's over. He walks away. I walk away. I go walk around for like half an hour. I'm just very depressed. And I come back to the party later on and I'm walking there, standing there by myself. And he walks up to me. And he comes up to me and he kind of like puts his arm around me and says, listen, I'm sorry. I know you did a good job. I know your heart's in the right place. And don't worry about it. Let's just forget about it. Everything's good. Thank you so much. You're a good man. And it's just like all the weight of the world is off my shoulders. I feel good. Everything's good again. So I just said, I love you. That's it. And he walked away. I walked away. I walked into the New York night, and it was all good again. So that's my story. And Dan, thank you for inviting me on your podcast. And I love the work that you do. And it's always great when we co-pro shows and all these crazy places. You always have a good attitude. You always make everything fun. And that's the only way it should be in this business, is having fun and joking around.
It means the world to me, Elliott. You're one of my favorite people on the entire planet. And, I look forward to whenever I get to have any interaction with you whatsoever. If it's backstage at a show and talking music history and B-sides of some of the more obscure alternative acts that we both know from the early 90s, or if it's those moments where we're talking about the industry and how it should be and how it is and where it's going. But your vibe on things and take is just always such delight.
Thank you so much. May you have another 120 shows.
Thanks, Elliott.
Take care, my friend.
We continue the celebration with the dulcet sounds of Andrea Johnson. Welcome to the podcast, Andrea.
Hi, Dan. Good to be back. Congratulations on turning 100. Do you feel old?
I feel wiser, and yet somehow not.
Well, that's life, right?
Well, speaking of life, I know that you're literally talking to us from a hotel room in Indianapolis, because that is our industry. Arts conferences at its finest, because that's the job.
That's the job. Beautiful JW Marriott here in downtown Indianapolis. Plug.
You've made it when they send you to Indianapolis, Andrea.
It's true. I really feel like I've gotten somewhere in the world.
I digress. Do you have a fun story for us?
Yes. So if you don't mind, I was going to put forth a theme and then give you stories on that theme. So today, the theme is classical musicians. They are just as wild as rock and hip hop musicians. Somewhere along the line, there seemed to be this misconception that people who play the violin or the cello or sing for a living are somewhere better behaved or more professional than rock bands or hip-hop artists or whomever, right, in the contemporary sphere. And I'm here to dispel that myth. And I have 3 short anecdotes, if you'll allow. So the first one is an opera singer that I used to represent, who was performing with a major symphony orchestra in Europe and came out of the rehearsal and was so angry about how the rehearsal and sound check went that he trashed his entire dressing room, opened the sodas, threw them on the floor, everything was on the floor, and then smashed his television. So that's thing one. The second story, if you've ever seen Get Him to the Greek, you know that part of the movie where Jonah Hill's character is tasked with bringing Russell Brand's character back from London to New York to do the Today Show. And he misses like 3 flights because Jonah Hill can't get him out of the club, like cannot get Russell Brand out of them. That scenario, that literal scenario happened with a violinist that I represented for a time. But he missed at least 2 flights because we could not shoehorn him out of the nightclub he was in, surrounded by all manner of drugs and alcohol and ladies of the evening. The only difference is it wasn't a live television appearance, so I think it was a taping and we ended up moving it. But virtuoso classical violinist, okay?
Maybe he was on a Jeffrey, petting the furry wall.
Petting the furry wall. Petting the furry wall. The third and final anecdote that I will offer, since I've been telling tales on others, is one about myself. I was in London with a client who was playing the O2 Arena, and this has been a while ago. This is like almost 10 years ago. It was somebody's 30th birthday party. So after the show, we all went out to what I believe now is actually a defunct, really high-end venue for exotic dancers. And at this establishment, you were not allowed to use actual money. You had to trade it in for Stringfellow's dollars, which in the dark to a drunk American looks slightly like a British pound, right? It's got the same general graphic. It's just in the middle, instead of the queen's face, it's a butterfly. So we had a great time.
Did you make it rain?
We made it rain. The ladies were lovely. We had a great time. And the next morning, I wander into a Starbucks, with a throbbing headache. I'm like, yeah, man, can I get a coffee? And he looks down and he laughs. And he goes, did you have a nice night last night? I'm like, what the? I look down and I have attempted to pay for my latte with stripper bucks. And scene. Stay in school, kids.
Oh, that's the best thing ever. And the guy probably took it because, that's cash to him.
I don't think Starbucks would allow it, but we had a nice laugh about it. So also, if you haven't watched the first 2 seasons of Mozart in the Jungle, watch it.
All right. Well, now you've made it a suggestion to our listeners. Mozart in the Jungle. Where is that on Netflix? Where do you find that?
Amazon, I believe. Yeah, it's got 4 seasons. The first 2 were good. The second 2 got weird. I don't know. It's based on a book.
Well, as always, it's just so great to have you on the podcast. I can't thank you enough for making time and ripping you from the arts for a moment to talk to us on Promoter 101.
I'm going to go have a glass of wine now.
Another great surprise for our 100th episode. Scott Lesley, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me, Steiny.
It's great to have you back. You got a story for us for the 100th?
Yeah, I got a good war story for you. A few years ago, we were partners on a camping festival in northern Wisconsin, at a site that was about 45 minutes from Minneapolis. And that was by far the largest market that we drew from. And we found out the weekend of the festival that one of the acts that we had booked themselves an after party at a nightclub in downtown Minneapolis. So we called the agent. We had our, sort of what the fuck moment, and their response was kind of the same. They claimed that they didn't book the date and that the act had gone rogue, and so they didn't know what they could do about it. And so our response was, well, they're in breach of their contract. They broke our radius. They're slapping us across the face. They're off the festival. You can imagine what the response to that was. 5 minutes later, we're on the phone with the RA, who's kind of just as dumbfounded about the after party, and also not pleased with what our response was. And at this point, we're kind of digging in on that. And now it's starting to get a little bit testy. Things are being said, and so they tell us they're going to call us back in like 5 minutes, and they call us back, and the president of the agency is on the phone, and now it's kind of really getting even nastier.
And I'm guessing this is a big agency, right? It doesn't sound like this is like a small little boutique that you don't really need their business.
Territorial to RA to, above that. You can figure out the ones where this is possible. So a lot of dirty laundry is being aired out. And finally, someone on there, and I don't remember who it was, says, a lot of people are at your festival this weekend and they don't care what's happening elsewhere. They paid to see them at your show. We'll call them. We'll get them to cancel it, but don't kick them off the festival. And that kind of resonated with us. And so we said, okay, as long as they cancel it and put it out on social media that we're the only place where they can be seen this weekend, we're cool. 45 minutes, an hour later, we see a tweet that the only place in Wisconsin where they would be playing that weekend was at our festival. So we're like, all right, they're playing with us. It's total bullshit. Facebook event is still active. But, we really felt bad still penalizing the kids who were at the festival. So we decided to let them stay on. But at this point, we're pretty enraged. So
they had ground transportation scheduled to pick them up at 10. And of course, they were supposed to be dropped off in downtown Minneapolis. So I went to the runner manager and told them, have your runner get lost, have them stop for gas, drop them off at the airport by mistake, whatever needs to happen, just make sure they don't get downtown. And that is my war story. It's the first and hopefully only time I sabotaged with the ground transportation.
Wow. So they literally went out of their way to like disingenuously tell you that they had fixed it. And then they very word craftedly changed things around when they put the thing up, hoping you wouldn't notice. And in fair play, you were like, all right, great. But if I'm going to get you back to Minnie, I'm not going to deliver you to a way to fuck me out of my show.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's a shortcut that, went into a construction zone. Who knows? Well, I don't know what the runner did, but I do know that they weren't dropped off until 12:45.
Scott Lesley, not to be fucked with. Thank you so much for doing our 100th episode.
Congrats, Steiny.
Hey, if you're following us online, comment on something, feel free to hashtag Pro101 turns 100 for this special episode. That's Pro101 turns 100.
Hello, this is Jared Smith with Ticketmaster. A big shout out to Steiny and company and a huge congrats on podcast number 100, the industry's leading interviewer. Congrats, Steiny, and good luck.
This fall, coming to a conference near you. Two legends meet face to face. Activists Bernie Cahill, Emporium presents Dan Steinberg, Billboard Live.
Bernie Cahill here. I'll be doing the keynote with Dan Steinberg at Billboard Live, Montage, Beverly Hills, November 13th.
Promoter 101, it's our 100th episode, and we're joined by our contributor, Dave Brooks from Amplify and Billboard. Thank you for joining us on this auspicious occasion.
I am so happy to be here for this 100 episodes. That is awesome. Congratulations, Steiny.
Thank you so much. I got to ask you, now that I'm in that world of multimedia, I get a lot from people that this is off the record. And for us, if you don't have a mic in your hand, you're fucking off the record. You being a reporter, like a real reporter, did people just change when you're in the room? It's like, Dave's here. I got to be careful what I say because fucking Billboard in the room.
Yes. I mean, the way you kind of think of like who is your friend has totally changed since I launched to Amplify. I mean, like I can't sit down to lunch with somebody without them telling me like what they ordered on the menu is like off the record. With text messages, phones, and voicemails. It's kind of weird how people are constantly like reminding me of the boundaries of what can be said and what's not off the record, and then there'll even be people who go deeper in there. They'll say, well, this is on background, but you can't use it. This is research, but you can. I mean, it's like I almost like can't even keep up with all the arrangements people are trying to make with me on what's confidential and what's not. I mean, I'm sure you're probably seeing that too now with having an interview. People are probably a little bit more gun shy about what they tell you.
Yeah, I mean, we take that really seriously. Like if you're telling us something like in confidence, we don't want to like screw that up. So there's definitely embargoed things that we know about, as I'm sure you do. And you never want to ruin that because the second you screw over somebody as a source, even if you do it accidentally, they're not a source anymore. And more importantly than reporting the news is sometimes being in on the inside circle of knowing what's going on in the biz.
Yeah, exactly. If people don't think they can trust you, you can't really do your job. It's interesting, like what we have to do almost to like protect our sources now, because let me tell you, like every single time I get a scoop on something, somebody asks them, hey, I got this from a source, people start immediately just hitting me like, who told you this? Please tell me, like, give me a clue, give me a hint. What's the first letter of their name? Like, do they wear pink bows? I mean, it's crazy.
Do they wear pink bows? It was Minnie Mouse. She told me. You got it. It's a polka dot dress conspiracy. I didn't realize that was such a big deal, although I remember recently rumors coming up and me being like, no, but who told you? So yeah, I get that.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is like chasing down rumors. You really have to like ask yourself, is it worth it to even ask this question? I mean, I hear so much stuff from people, and like, let's be honest, concert promoters are not the most reliable sources in the world.
Fuck you, Dave. Fuck you, man.
And so you get this information and you really got to look at it hard before you decide what you're going to do with it and whether or not you should even bother asking.
I pride myself on being a reliable source. Whenever I tell you something, you could take that shit to the bank, man.
You're the exception.
Thank you so much for joining us for our 100th episode.
Of course, anytime.
another special guest for our 100th episode, Joey Vendetta, Joey Scoleri. Welcome back to the podcast, brother.
How are you, sir?
Stoked to have you back, man.
You don't look 100 at all. You're pretty good looking for 100.
We keep our internet shape in check.
You keep your digital health in order, as it were.
We're digitally airbrushed.
Me too. Stories for your 100th episode. I was thinking of, because you said Joey Vendetta, which was my radio programming and on-air name. Then Joey Scoleri is my real name, which is what I use, at Live Nation. And I was kind of trying to combine the two from when I was in radio to the concert business. So a long time ago, many, many years ago, when the radio station Q107 in Toronto celebrated its 15th anniversary, and it was back when radio was the gatekeeper. You didn't hear a song until you heard it on the radio. There was no internet. When an album came out, and then CDs later, the first people to hear it were the people who got to hear it that first time you played it. One of the first bands that I was one of the first guys to play, if not the first guy to play, was a band called the Black Crowes, whom I'm sure everyone listening is familiar with. After that first record, Shake Your Moneymaker, blew up and sold millions and millions of copies. It was our station's 15th anniversary, and I was trying to think of something to give back to the listeners. And, in this day and age where everybody wants something, nobody does anything for free. Back then, I think it was a little more, I guess, fluid in terms of having those conversations. So anyway, I was interviewing Chris Robinson for the second record, and the second record had just come out, and interviewing him for an album release special. I was at his house in Atlanta, and we were smoking substances that are currently legal in a bunch of places that weren't legal back then. And we were at his house, which was out in the country, and we're sitting there, and we're doing the interview, and he's got dogs, and dogs are barking, and we're starting to, feel the effects of what we were smoking. And I look at him and I say, "Hey, man, have you ever done a free concert?" And he looks at me and goes, "No. Why would we do a free concert? Nobody does free concerts." I said, "Well, it's my station's 15th anniversary, and it would be great if you would do a free concert." And my buddy Mark Didio was there, who was the promo guy who's the head of promotion at Geffen Records at the time and worked for Rick Rubin. It was Deaf American and distributed by Geffen. And he was kind of out of earshot, or I don't know how well he would have reacted to me asking that question. Chris looks at me, and his dog is there, and his dog kind of looks at both of us, and he looks at his dog. He says to his dog, "What do you think? Should we do a free concert for Q107's 15th anniversary?" And his dog starts barking and wagging its tail. And he looks at me, and he goes, "Okay, we'll do it." Fast forward to several months later, we do a free concert in a park in Toronto called G. Ross Lord Park. And it was a month after the Guns N' Roses riot in Montreal at Olympic Stadium, where they played with Metallica, where James Hetfield got burned. And then Axl went on and decided to not stay on. And the crowd rioted, and they caused like $3 million damage to Olympic Stadium, otherwise known as the Big O if you're a Montreal Expos fan. And so our station manager started panicking. Everybody started panicking. And I called the event Q-Stock because I wanted to give it the spirit of Woodstock, and our station was Q107. So I fight everybody, basically argue with them, and this is when the Crows had gotten thrown off the ZZ Top Tour for sponsorship. So, they were not the easiest guys in the world to deal with, but I had a great relationship with them. Long story short, they do the concert. We do it at 4 p.m. At 12 o'clock, I'm standing with the manager, Pete Angelis. There's 1,000 people in the park, and I promised him that there would be 50,000 people. I'm like, "Pete, we're going to promote the heck out of this. It's going to be huge." There's 1,000 people in the park at noon. There's no gates. There's no fences. It's free. And Pete looks at me like, "Joey, where are all the people? Why is nobody here yet?" 1 o'clock, there's probably 5,000 people in the park. "Okay, Joey, where are all the people?" At 2 o'clock, people started basically entering the park at like 500 people a minute. By the time the band went on at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, there were 75,000 people in the park.
Wow.
There wasn't one arrest. There were about 100 kids that we encouraged people to stick around after to clean up the park. We gave them garbage bags and like broom handles with a nail on the end to pick up garbage. They cleaned up the park. On Monday, we get a phone call from the city who didn't want us to do the concert to begin with, and we're not the easiest to deal with, but we got it done. And we get a phone call from the city, and I pick up the phone, and it's, the city councilor or whoever, and he's like, "That event was great. Everyone was really happy. Who are we doing next year?" And I said, "We're not. This is a one-time only event." So we did a free concert with 75,000 people with no arrests in 1992 with the Black Crowes, the only band on the bill. We called it Q-Stock, and it only happened because either Chris Robinson's dog was high or he knew what Chris was saying to him.
Is it possible that you guys were just so high you thought the dog was barking at you?
Highly possible. We thought the dog was talking to us.
Love it. Joey, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast for our 100th.
Anytime, my friend, anytime. And congratulations and happy birthday. And keep up the digital workouts because you look fantastic.
The 100th episode keeps rolling on with great surprises. Andy Summers, welcome back to the podcast.
Happy to be here, Dan. I just want to congratulate Promoter 101 on the 100th episode. And I know my original 2 episodes are probably the top 2, but the rest of them have been pretty good. My favorite is probably Bruce Solar, but my favorite is really Promoter 101 and you, Dan. You were a high school kid. I sold you some dates. You were a punk rocker. You had your heart in it. When it came to the Circle Jerks, which was one of my most important acts, I kind of thrusted the major promoter in as your partner when you took it to the Aslan, but you showed that was not necessary anymore. You grew. You do what you do. You're a national promoter now. Congratulations to Luke as well on Promoter 101. Congratulations to Jason Zink of Emporium Presents for keeping you out of trouble. And this is just a great time. I am just really proud of you and really happy that you're one of my favorite friends in the music business. Keep it up.
Andy, thanks so much for taking time and talking to us. And it's so great to have you back on the podcast.
Thank you, Steiny.
Hey, it's Lance Roberts from UTA. Big congrats to Dan and Luke on 100 enlightening episodes of Promoter 101.
Surprises keep rolling out. We've got the Supermensch himself with us. Shep Gordon, welcome back to the podcast.
Nice to be back. Aloha.
How you doing today? You got a story for us?
Sure. Always got a story. Might even be a true one. I mean, one of my favorites is the first time Alice played England. We were overachievers. We took a date at Wembley Arena because he was selling a lot of tickets in America, and we thought he'd do the same in London. I got in about a week early, and we had sold almost no tickets. We were on a Warner Brothers record label at the time, and they had a fellow there named Derek Taylor. And Derek Taylor was always called the Fifth Beatle, and he was their publicist and a brilliant guy. So I went to the head of the record company, and Warner's in a panic. We haven't sold any tickets. We're going to be ruined. Got to have help. He said, go speak to Derek. And I went into Derek's office at 3:00 in the afternoon, and there was Harry Nilsson, George Harrison in a long white robe, a jazz pianist named George Melly, who was fantastic, and a lot of liquor and assorted other things. And maybe about 8:00, it finally became my turn to talk. Everybody else had left, and Derek, who always dangled a cigarette in his hand, I wish I could visually explain it, but almost like a Lauren Bacall or a Humphrey Bogart, he always had this cigarette dangling. And he said, tell me what your story is. And I said, well, I managed this act, Alice Cooper. And he said, I've never heard of Alice Cooper. I said, well, they're on your label, and we're coming over for our first show, and we haven't sold any tickets, and we need to sell 8,000 tickets. I have 6 days left till the show. And he said, but no, tell me more about Alice Cooper. And I started to talk to him, and I told him that one of the things that really helped put him in the spotlight in America was that parents hated him, that there was this huge wave of fear in parents that if their sons and daughters went to an Alice Cooper concert, they would be corrupted for the rest of their lives, which drove the kids to go to the concert. I was talking a little more, and I could see I lost them. He said, tell me, so how do you talk to these parents? So I said, well, in America, we have network TV, and we have newspapers. We have the 6:00 news, and I try and do outrageous things that'll make the news. He said, thought for a minute, and then we started talking about British television. And he said, I asked him, where do people get their information in England? And he said the most popular thing is the BBC Morning News, which has the weather and has the traffic for the cars, and people get up, and that's sort of what they watch. So I said, well, that's where we want to be. He said, well, traffic is the most important thing here. If we could somehow figure out how to get in the traffic, everybody will see it in the morning. That's where you can talk to them. And the end of that conversation was Derek found me a truck driver who was willing to go to jail for a while.
That's not an easy thing to find, right?
No, but, we thought it would be overnight or something, but it could be a week that we pay him. Alice had just done a photo session in America with Richard Avedon, a very famous fashion photographer. And he was naked with a snake wrapped around his genitals. So we blew that up to 40 feet. We put it on the back of a flatbed truck on both sides. We hired girls in hot pants because this is 1972. So disco was really big. So I remember they had leather boots and stuff to be on the truck with pamphlets. And we broke the truck down at Piccadilly Circus, which was the most congested rush hour spot in England.
Be like Times Square, right? That's crazy busy.
Like Times Square. So we break it down. The police come, move the truck, get a tow truck, get the truck out. 30 minutes later, the truck's back, broken down. And of course, we had, in those days, the paparazzi were the Fleet Street photographers, they were called. So we had notified all of them that there might be a traffic problem around that time. So we got great photos. The driver went to jail for 2 days, and the show sold out by the weekend. We caught a really lucky break that there was a lady in Parliament who was in the traffic and got stuck and didn't get to the House of Commons in time. And she went to the House of Commons the next day and introduced a bill to ban Alice in England. And that hit the front page of the British papers, and we sold out basically overnight because that's what motivated kids.
You can't go.
Yeah, you can't go. And also now on the front page of the British paper is a guy naked with a snake wrapped around him named Alice Cooper in 1972.
Oh, that's incredible, Shep.
All right, congratulations on your 100th.
We've got from Lyte, Ant Taylor is back with us. Welcome back for our 100th episode, Ant. How you doing, buddy?
Doing great. Living the dream down here in San Francisco.
Nice. You got a story for us?
I do. I was thinking about down here in the Valley, typically is all you get is a success story. So I thought it'd be fun to take you back to a story from the abyss of starting a startup, and particularly starting Lyte.
The abyss. Let's go deep.
Let's go deep.
See, I knew that word. You're surprised, but I remember the movie. That's the only reason I know that vocab word.
So this goes all the way back to the beginning. We were literally on the brink of launching our first product. We'd spent 6 months on it, and it was 2 days before our marketing launch. And I woke up and I realized that our product was stupid and that it sucked. I woke up Alessandra, my girlfriend at the time, now fiance, and said, I think I'm going to throw out our product and start over. And she said, that sounds great, but what about this huge marketing event that you planned? And she was referring to the flatbed truck that was parked outside of our apartment where we built a stage with the intention of driving all over CMJ in New York, putting on shows. And everything was booked. It was impossible to unwind anything. So I said, I guess the show will just go on. For 2 days, Friday and Saturday, I drove around New York, putting on these shows with my prettiest face and my brightest smile. But in the pit of my stomach, I realized we were marketing a product that we didn't have and getting fans really excited about something that we couldn't necessarily deliver them. The abyss came on Sunday when the DJ canceled, and it was our last event. And there was really only one person who could step in to fill his shoes, and that was yours truly. And I remember driving on my way to this event and pulling over to the costume shop and picking up a skeleton costume and a nun's costume for my girlfriend and thinking as I paid for this is definitely not how I thought it would end up. I thought we were going to be building technology, we were going to be launching it, we were going to change ticketing, and now I'm in a costume shop en route to DJing for the first time, pretty much hitting rock bottom. And if you'd come to that event and actually peeled the skeleton costume off of my face, you would have seen total desolation and fear and despair at where we were.
Well, I love the image of this so far. You're basically Johnny from Karate Kid in the Halloween scene, running around in the skeleton costume. And your DJ name just totally works. DJ Skeleton Ant. It's awesome. You could have gone into EDM. So, this is all setting up to be awesome in my head, but you don't sound thrilled.
No, I was definitely not thrilled. But listen, we got through it. The silver lining was in all these shenanigans, we found our first employee at Karina, who, if you work with us, you've met her. She's the rock of the operation. So it all worked out, but I'll never forget the despair of feeling as far away from my dream as I'd ever been standing in that Halloween shop. But a lesson for all the kids listening to this podcast who are interested in starting a company. Here's my advice. Don't do it. And if I can't advise you not to do it, then I insist that you have a product before you launch a marketing event. Trust me, it'll do wonders for your stress level. And if you're currently sitting in a car en route to a marketing event, even though you don't have a product, all I can tell you is you're an idiot, but keep your legs under you, fight through, and one day you might be on Promoter 101.
Awesome, Ant. Thank you so much.
Always good to humiliate myself on the 100th episode of Promoter 101.
Another amazing surprise. Danny Zelisko's with us. Danny, thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure, big boy.
Ooh, I just got to chill.
I'm on number 100. I like it. It's like my age.
You're not quite there yet, buddy.
Yeah, I know. So I got a great story for you, and I really haven't told it that often, but it's one of my favorites over the years. Whitney Houston and I used to do some shows together back in the day. Whitney is like Madonna, like Aretha. They do that thing where they don't like air conditioning on during the shows. So they make you turn it off from the time they come in the building for sound check. You know, it can be really brutal, especially in this part of the country where we live. So that part of the day, that drama got taken care of, even though it was at a very hot time of the year. It's a very hot day. So later on, there's an opening act on stage. The production manager says to me, Miss Houston wants to see you. Now, I've only met her once or twice before that, and she kind of traveled on her own and really wasn't like one of these people that you run into backstage and chat up. This is Miss Houston. So we're at the Thomas & Mack Center in Vegas, and I go into her dressing room, and she is seething mad. I go, what's wrong? She goes, that motherfucking Mike Tyson, he knows what he's doing. I said, what are you talking about? She goes, he's sitting on the back of my stage with those two bookend security guards of his, and he's stealing my thunder. Because this is when Tyson was huge. He was the champion of the world. She demanded that I go out there and have him leave the stage. And she goes, and she's shaking her finger in my face. She's not mad at me. She's just mad. And she's going, I want you to go out there with authority, swagger, go to him and tell him he has got to leave the stage right now or I'm not going on.
Not too intimidating at all. The biggest heavyweight champion in the world versus
me. And you remember, of course, that, at the time he was famous for rushing out in the middle of the ring and dropping guys before they even knew what hit him. I'm not thinking he's going to hit me, but it is Mike Tyson. So I'm a little, as I'm getting closer to the stage, I'm walking down the hall. As I turn right to go down the runway to the stage, my heart starts beating. And I actually felt myself, sweating a little bit underneath my hair. So I go up the stage and the two big guys, like on command, are standing at the top of the stairs with their arms folded like it's their stage, and it isn't. And I don't know why he's on the stage, except he's Mike Tyson, and somebody sees him coming, they're going to let him go up the stairs. So I go, I got to speak to the champ a minute. And I hear from behind these two giant guys, let him through. So the C's part, and I go to the champ, and I go, look, champ, introduce myself, big fan, but we got something serious going on here. You go, what's that? I go, Miss Houston is very upset with you right now, and me as well. Why? Because I let you on the stage. And he goes, no, you didn't. I just walked up here. Nobody stopped me. I said, I'm here to tell you that I need to get you off the stage or there's going to be no show tonight. And they're chanting, people are watching, and they're going, champ, champ, champ. Mike, Mike, Mike. And I go, you hear that? Look what you're doing. I go, you're stealing her thunder, So I said, would you mind if I kind of take you by the arm gently and lead you down the stairs? I got some great seats for you. He goes, okay, I understand. And I do it, and there's a mixture of clapping and boos and all this stuff. And the minute I get him off the stage, the lights drop, the show starts. She's fantastic. She knocks the place out. Doesn't make any mention of Mike Tyson or that incident or anything. After the show, the production manager comes back to me and he goes, Miss Houston would like to see you. I go, God.
Oh, here we go again.
Now what did he do? Is he in her bathroom? And I walk in, and I go in the door, and she looks at me and puts her arms up in the air like my hero, and the door pushes closed, and Mike Tyson's standing behind the door. And I go, you're not going to slug me, are you? He goes, I should have dropped you when I had a chance. And she's laughing her ass off. I go, you guys set me up. She goes, no, I really did want his ass off the stage. Thank you, you're my hero. He goes, I should have dropped you. He goes, just kidding. Sorry, Whitney. And that was the end of it. But that was my night with Mike and Whitney. You could call it a three-way.
Thank you so much, Danny, for joining us on our 100th.
You got it, man.
Jason Zink at Emporium presents. Congratulations to Dan and Luke on making it through 100 episodes without killing each other. Congrats, guys.
Hey, if you're following us online, comment on something, feel free to hashtag
Pro 101 turns 100.
We've got Rick Farrell here with us. Ricky, thank you for being here to celebrate this.
Hello. Oh, thank you. Congratulations on 100 episodes.
Thank you so much. Hey, you got a story for us?
All right, this one goes all the way back to 1997, the first gig I ever booked as an agent. I was at MPI. I booked Vicky Carr at the Fountain Blue Hotel in Miami, scheduled to do 2 shows, one in Spanish and one in English. And all the interview and promo had been done that way. Well, she did the first show fine. The second show she comes out and she does the first 2 songs in Spanish. And the owner is there, and he tells the buyer that I work with, if she does another song in Spanish, drop the curtain on her and cancel the show. This isn't what we were expecting. So the third song rolls around, and she's introducing an English song, and somebody from the audience calls out a Spanish song. And she says, oh, we'll do that one first. And she goes into a Spanish song. And the owner radios back to the curtain guy and says, drop the curtain. And my guy had run back there, and he told him, if you drop that curtain, I'll have your legs broken. But if you get fired, I'll get you another job. So just let it roll. And they rolled through it. She got through that third song, got into the next song, and did the rest of the show in English like she was supposed to do, and everything worked out okay. But this was the very first gig I ever booked, and I was completely not expecting the feedback that I got. I called, Monday morning to follow up on the show to find out how everything went, and it was like the craziest, worst thing that could have possibly happened. But my buyer was on the ball, and he averted the whole situation, and everything played out great.
I don't know where you start when you actually want to have somebody's legs physically broken in the business. Is there a guy that you call for that, or is there an app now? And was that a thing back in the day?
This was before Uber.
Did that happen at some point? Was there consequences that you would literally in business, if you fucked up, you get your legs broken? It sounds like mob days.
I don't know. It was a crazy, crazy phone call. I was not expecting. I was wondering what kind of business did I get myself into. But the guy was a real sweetheart, and, he sounded like a New York tough guy. And when he was telling me the story, I just couldn't believe what I was hearing.
Well, to this day, I don't think anybody's had their legs broken on a Rick Farrell show. So no. Clear sailing since then, huh?
That's right. It was all downhill from there.
Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast for our 100th episode.
Thank you.
Fans and friends of the podcast, it is on this special occasion of our 100th episode that we bring you the great Nick Storch. Welcome back to the podcast, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Do you have a story to share with our listeners?
I do. Is the story of, I guess in a way, I would say how the music business saved my life, which is a bit of a dramatic statement to say, but I was covering a show in Toronto well over a decade ago, and a friend of mine said that she wanted to hang out, and she would bring her roommate, who she thought I might know, who turned out to be someone who worked at the agency group in Toronto. And I said, sure, why not? Whatever. I came out of my hotel to meet them, and I see this woman who I am just absolutely and thoroughly taken by. Obviously, now my wife. We ended up dating long distance, and we tried to hide it from everyone as much as possible because she worked at the agency group. We used to meet up in the alleyway at the old agency group office in Toronto and make out and try to make sure no one knew about what was happening.
Were you at TAG at the time, or you had already gone to ICM?
No, I was at TAG at the time. But it wasn't until the Canadian Music Week of that year, which I forget the year, where we kind of sort of got outed because, we were out at shows together and there was other people from the company and, but everyone was exceptionally supportive of us. Steve Herman just said, come up to Toronto whenever you like. We'd love to have you. No questions asked. So they were very, very big sponsors to some degree for our relationship. However, the funny part comes after one summer, Christina went to Steve and said, listen, I'd really like you to transfer me to the New York office. I'm really into this guy and this is really working. And Steve just said, nope, I'm sorry. I can't do it. I wish you guys all the best. I hope I hope you can prove me wrong that it can work, but that's just not a risk I'm willing to take. So fast forward another summer, Christina and I got engaged. We wanted to make it the run of this, and we were back in Canada to celebrate her parents' wedding anniversary. And about 6 o'clock in the morning, we went to cross the border. We couldn't cross together because we were not, legally married yet. So we both go to separate agents. And she is, for all intents and purposes, told that she can't go back to America because she has an intent to change her status. So I frantically stood on the other side of customs waiting for her for over an hour, only to get a very upset phone call that she had been told she couldn't enter America. All that to say that we got a lawyer and for 8 months had to wait for a meeting with the consulate in Montreal to be allowed to get married. We fly to Montreal together. We go through the meeting. We're swiftly approved for our marriage visa, and we go to leave the building, and the elevator opens to go to the next place to leave. And who walks out of the elevator but Steve Herman?
Of course.
It was very, very funny. We just celebrated our 8th wedding anniversary. We've got 2 lovely children. And so that's why I say that, the music business saved my life, because without my wife, I would be a very, very lost human being. And so that really is the best thing that could have ever happened to me. And the best thing about being in the business is I met my wife through it.
Nick, thank you so much for bringing a little romance to our 100th episode.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Sorry, it's not a story of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and just a little romance, but the story that I have to contribute.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, podcast listeners of all ages, please welcome for our 100th episode, Nederlander's Jamie Loeb.
Hi, Dan.
What's going on? We got a story for our listeners on this blessed occasion of our 100th episode?
I certainly do. Look, in past episodes of Promoter 101, I told you how I started in the business, and you heard how Paul Westerberg tried to buy my pants, but I haven't told you why I love doing what I do. My job gives me access to some really amazing once-in-a-lifetime opportunities, but there's no telling when those special moments are going to come along, nor does it really represent the flip side, extra special moments, like copying 10,000 coloring sheets at midnight on a Tuesday to ship to Toys R Us for a children's show. So the bottom line, why I love doing what I do, is I love music. It's in the very fiber of my being. I love sharing music. As you know, I shy away from public accolades, and I don't love being in the spotlight. You practically had to ship me paper bags to breathe into to keep me from hyperventilating when we first started doing this stuff. But one of my most favorite things when I'm at a show is to look out into the crowd and think to myself, I helped make this happen. We're not curing cancer, but we are bringing people joy. And that, to me, is everything.
There's something about that magic of the live event, the energy in the room, and sharing that with the 50 to 65,000 people that are in the venue with you. And it's that shared moment and that feeling that you can't get by hitting play on an MP3, or even if you're in a suite at an arena or at a stadium, it doesn't have that same feel when you're out in the mix of the show amongst the people.
Absolutely. And look, I don't even need to love who's on stage. The fact that everybody at the show is loving who's on stage and that I helped make that happen for them is priceless. That is the magic for me.
With that in mind, who is the best show of your recent memory that you got to witness?
Oh, my goodness. The first one that comes to mind is we did Janelle Monáe. She puts on an amazing performance. On the flip side, we've done a couple Slayer shows on this farewell tour. Having 14,000 Slayer fans in one place is a little frightening for me, but it's incredible to watch, as much as those mosh pits can get rather aggressive, to see everybody help somebody that's fallen, somebody that needs some additional help, some additional protection, and seeing that kind of camaraderie is really cool.
From Slayer to Janelle Monáe. Thank you so much for sharing with us on our special, special day.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, this is David Britz from Works Entertainment. Huge shout out to Dan and Luke on the 100th episode of Promoter 101. Very proud of you guys. It's always a blast. And I'm looking forward to the next 100 episodes. Congratulations, guys.
We've had many surprise guests, but this one represents the arena business in all its greatness, because you can't just decide to put an arena anywhere and make it awesome right off the bat. But if you're going to, and you want to put it maybe right in the middle of the Vegas Strip, there's only one guy you can call. From the T-Mobile Arena, Greenfeig back on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here on our special day.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back. I guess I didn't fuck up the first time.
Dude, congrats on the success of the new venue. You guys are killing it.
Thank you. It's been a hell of a ride so far for the past almost 3 years. So it's life is good.
Can I get a story from you for this great day?
Yeah. So I guess I'm going to go with probably one of the crazier things I've ever had to do in my career to get a show. Didn't happen in Vegas, oddly enough. It happened in good old Fort Lauderdale. Back in the time, it was the Jay-Z tour. I think it's when he was touring off the Black Album. If you can imagine, it was the big competition between us and Miami. South Beach and the allure of the urban community in the Miami market is huge. And bringing them into the suburbs of Fort Lauderdale was definitely a challenge. I sat with my boss, and at the time president of the Florida Panthers, Michael Yormark. We were in a room in his office one night, and he's like, we're not leaving until we have 10 great ideas to convince Jay-Z to play the arena. And, you know, you go through the normal things. We'll cover air or we'll do all the hotels, you know, normal rehearsal shit. Then I was like, well, we have a helipad, so he can stay in Miami and we'll get a helicopter to fly him every day for rehearsal, to come in, lands at the arena and do that. We'll do a VIP, you know, host an event for him, kind of going through. And he kept saying, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. And I got frustrated. And I'm like, well, what the fuck do you want to do? Name the arena after him? And he goes, what did you say? And I said, what are we going to do? Call it the Jay-Z Arena? And he goes, yes, write that down. And I'm like, how the fuck are we going to do that? We have a title sponsor. He goes, you pitch it, I'll figure it out. Lo and behold, that day, opening night of the tour, Jay-Z's flying in from Miami, and all he sees on the marquee is, welcome to the Jay-Z Center, presented by Bank Atlantic. So it was wild. He actually, from time to time, will still talk about it to Michael, because Michael now works for Rock Nation. But yeah, no, it was definitely a memorable moment, something that I thought would have been the utter impossible of changing the name of your arena to get an act. But once again, this business never ceases to amaze.
Surprised that didn't take off and everyone is constantly changing it to the Motley Crue Center or the Metallica Dome.
I may have now given a lot of artists a lot of ideas.
Thank you so much, Sid.
You got it.
Guests just keep rolling, talking about icons, Entourage's talents. Wayne 48, welcome back to the podcast.
Glad to be back. When I heard that there might be an opportunity for me to tell a story, you know me, I'm here. I'm ready to roll.
No better way to ring in our 100th show than a story from you, Wayne.
Thank you very much. So let's roll back to 1983, maybe 82 even, but let's say 83. So that's way back. That's back before a lot of people's time. They're probably even listening to this thing.
I was 7.
You were So you were 7. So while you were watching Sesame Street or whatever on TV, I was in the process of booking and co-producing the David Bowie Serious Moonlight Tour. So I guess we should call it 1982 because that's when we started planning everything. In any event, I mean, there's lots of stories from that tour, but one that came to mind immediately when you mentioned this 100th anniversary of the podcast was trying to figure out what to do in London, you know, London being basically his hometown. You know, the idea was to try to make this thing bigger than life. I mean, David's commitment to us producing the tour was, I'm going to write a big album, I'm going to write a hit, which in the end was his biggest album, if I'm not mistaken, in sales, and certainly had one of his biggest, if not the biggest hit of all time for him. So the idea was to make London bigger than life. You know, we talked to a lot of different promoters and they all had different suggestions, you know, 2 shows at Wembley, 6 shows at Wembley Arena, et cetera, et cetera. And that, at the time, Wembley Arena was kind of the iconic arena. There were others, but that was sort of an iconic arena in London. But really we wanted it to be even bigger than that. So initially we sat down, we talked, we looked around, we had some conversations with, you know, various promoters and people over there. I actually flew over there for a week and had some meetings, and we held 4 shows.
At the arena or the stadium?
At the arena. Our plan really in secret, not what we made public, was to book it indoors all over and try to bounce from there and go outdoors. So we held 4, and we held an outdoor facility in Milton Keynes. It's at 60,000, if I'm not mistaken. And, you know, the thought was, should we just go with 1? Should we go with 2? If you do 1, it's just nothing. If you do 2, so other people could do 2. Do we do 6? That's kind of a little bit of an overkill. I mean, it's like, you know, you make a statement already. So we held 4, and we thought, now, how are we going to do this? Now, let's remember, this is back before Ticketmaster. This was back in the day, probably during Ticketron days in America, but in the UK, they were still selling them, you know, sheets of paper over the counter, or you could mail in and buy them.
You mean like record stores out of a shoebox kind of thing?
Yeah, all of that. You know, like there was a book of tickets and you tore them out, you know, and you sold them kind of thing, right? You kept the receipt and, you know, you had your little thing and you tore it off when you went in, which, you know, they did here not till probably up till about 5-6 years ago, I guess, in some venues. But over there, they were actually like paper, you know, although we made some special tickets for places on the tour. In any event, we decided to go mail order. We figured if we go mail order, we can see whether we have our 4 shows. Do we only have 2 shows? Do we have 8 shows? Do we have our outdoor show? So we just advertised 3 shows at Wembley Arena, and we had a 4th one on hold as well. And we put it up on sale. We do it mail order. We go back to the UK. We go to London. I think we held the date at Milton Keynes just in case at the end of the tour. So the London show was in the beginning of the tour, not the very beginning, but at the beginning. We put up the 3 mail order, and we go back, and we call him, the promoter's office, and we said, how are we doing? He goes, oh, you have to see. I mean, you know, we're doing really well. So we get over there, and we said, okay, so are we good? Are we good for the 3 shows? Like, how are we? He goes, let's go down to the place and have a look. And he had hired this small office, and he had 2 people in there working mail order. We walk in the door, and literally, there were mail bags stacked to the frickin' ceiling. And we looked at each other, and we looked at the promoter, and we said, I guess we've sold out the 3 shows. And he goes, yeah, we not only sold those out, but we also sold the stadium out already. We immediately advertised 2 shows at Milton Keynes, and I believe we held another one in advance. And by the time we got through all the mail orders, we had all the indoor stuff sold. We had the 2 outdoors sold, and we put a 3rd one up for the end of the tour. So we ended up with 3 indoors and 3 stadiums.
Nobody does that kind of business. I think Zach Brown in Boston maybe does 3. It's very rare that you hear anybody doing multiples outside. Pearl Jam does 2 in a bunch of markets. Those guys sell it so quick. There are more dates there if they wanted, but there are very few acts that can do that.
So don't forget, that's 1983. I mean, that was massive. I got to say, it was fucking massive.
Bowie in the UK for as many dates as you can handle. That's insane. Wayne, it's always awesome to have you sharing with us and our listeners on Promoter 101. Thank you so much.
Everybody take care. Have a good time.
100th anniversary just keeps rolling on. This one is so cool because depending on which number you look up, is she at AEG Goldenvoice? Is she at Live Nation? Lesley Olenik is at Live Nation, and she's with us right now on Promoter 101. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
So you got a story for us, right?
Yeah, I have a pretty cool story about a big band playing a small room in LA. One of the biggest bands in the world, the Rolling Stones. So back in 2013, AEG Concerts West was taking over their touring, and John Meglin and Paul Gongaware came to me, being one of the promoters in the LA office, and asked if I would help them promote a warm-up show with the Stones in LA. They wanted a room that wasn't a typical room for an underplay. So I called some people over at the Echoplex to see if they would want to do the show. And they actually had a weekly, can't remember what weekly it was, that we had to move. But I'm like, this is the Rolling Stones. Like, just get rid of it. Whatever you need to do. They're like, well, we need to pay out the other promoter. I'm like, okay, let's do it. So we went over and looked at the venue, and his production manager wanted to make sure that it was going to work for them, and it ended up being a great fit. And yeah, they played the room, and the way we put the show on sale was it was a lottery at the El Rey. So you had to come over to the El Rey and wait in line. And if you were selected to buy tickets, you would purchase them at the El Rey, get wristbanded. That way, that night when you went to the Echo, you would just walk in, and that was a way for us to combat the scalpers. And the funny part was a lot of the local LA scalpers were actually in line, and we told them, hey, if you're going to go, you have to put this wristband on and you can't sell the ticket. So basically, you know, everyone who had a chance to buy a ticket showed up at the concert that night. And I just remember watching them on stage, and I was standing next to Johnny Depp and Gwen Stefani and Skrillex, my dad, my future husband's dad, and a bunch of fans, and it was a pretty epic moment.
What a hang. My dad, my future husband's dad, and Gwen Stefani and Skrillex. How cool is that? That's got to be the weirdest moment ever. Hey, Dad, do you know Johnny Depp? Johnny Depp, Skrillex?
Yeah, it was cool.
Thank you so much for helping us ring in our 100th episode, Lesley.
Yeah, absolutely. Congratulations. Thanks for having me.
Hey, this is Jay Williams from WME. Congratulations on your 100th episode, Steiny. Never thought you'd make it past 2.
It doesn't get any bigger than the Shappy one. Peter Shapiro, thank you for making time.
Steiny, good to be here. I got one for you.
Bring it on.
Just in the theme of what we do, and like, you got to be there. If you're not there, you know, you can't see it. It doesn't happen. And like, for the gig that we do, a lot of times you're tired and you're beat up, like, do I got to go to this show? Or do I got to go travel to this festival? And so here's the story. Years ago, I made a movie, 3D movie with the band with U2. And one of the cool things was because I made this movie with U2, we got to go to the Cannes Film Festival and like the big premiere at the Palais Theater. And I get a couple spots because I produced a movie. Otherwise, you and I, we're doing good, but we're not going to that kind of stuff.
No shit, that's awesome.
But I'm in because I made the movie. So the wife can't come. She's pregnant. So I go to my friend, Jake Szufnarowski, great American. He books Wetlands, CBGB, does the Rocks Off the Boat cruise. Hopefully a lot of your listeners know him. He's the epitome of rock and roll. I said, Jake, I got the big premiere. I'm going to Cannes. I'm going to be with you two. It's at the main Palais Theater. The band's actually going to play on the steps, which they did. No one knew that. The streets have no name, but on the steps. So, do you want to be my date? My plus one. And he's like, are we going to meet? Am I going to meet John Bon Jovi or Kid Rock? And I go, well, I don't know, but if you're ever going to meet one of those two guys, it's going to be at Cannes. So he goes, okay, I'm in. He flew to Italy, I believe, got on a motorcycle, drove a motorcycle, and he's got crazy stories. And you can look it up online, this crazy story, what happens on this motorcycle trip. But he crashes on the day of the premiere, gets to Cannes in France, on the roads, gets knocked over. So, when I met him at that afternoon at the premiere, he shows up, of course, in his fucking rock and roll leather motorcycle outfit, but with blood coming out of him. And he's sweating and bleeding. And so, we had to get a nurse to, fix him up. So we fix the guy up. We go to the premiere. I got my tux on. He had some crazy tux. He's a real rock and roll, motherfucker. And we go to the premiere. We're on the steps. We're hanging with Bono. We go to the party.
Hanging with Bono. No big deal. Just hanging with Bono.
Yeah. No, we're going to U2's party at Cannes, and I'm in the VIP section because I produced the movie with Jake. We get in, we go to the party. This is a party we'd never be let into if I hadn't made the movie. They had to let me in. So we get in the party, and we're there, and we're like, oh my God, fucking Kid Rock's fucking here. And Jake had been like, am I going to meet John Bon Jovi or Kid Rock? And I was like, and then Kid Rock was at the party. So we go up to him. I had made another film with him a long time ago, my IMAX film, All Access. So I knew Bobby for a long time. I'm like, yo. And he's like, what's up? I'm like, yo, you meet Jake. And Jake had been to Kid Rock shows before Devil Without a Cause, his big album and all that shit dropped. And he had been selling Kid Rock bootlegs outside his shows in Detroit when he was playing 600 cap clubs and knew every lyric. And Kid Rock were sitting there, and Kid Rock is where did you find this guy? Because he knows every lyric that Kid Rock's ever done. And Kid Rock's with a supermodel, and he's like, yo, we gotta roll. We're leaving. We're going back to the boat. Because in Cannes, everyone stays on the giant yacht. I wasn't, but he did, And he's with a supermodel, Mae Anderson. And so he's like, yo, Pete and Jake, you guys come with us. And she's like, this happened. We're getting in the car. She's like, no, they can't. We're not bringing them. And he's like, yeah, we are. And she's like, no, not to the back of the yacht. We got to tell Jessica. And he's like, get in. And he pulls us in the car. And we get to the yacht, get on the yacht, and who greeted Jessica Simpson's yacht. And 10 people, not giant 100 people, small. I guess Kid Rock was staying on her boat with him. And he brought us on. Now it's 3, 4 in the morning. And we hang out for a while. James Blunt was on it. We were hanging. We end up in the jacuzzi at 5, 6 in the morning in Cannes. Everyone's asleep but me, Jake, and Kid Rock. We're in the jacuzzi, the two of me and Jake. And Kid Rock starts playing us his new record and he's been singing it for us. And just lots of crazy stuff happened. I can tell you that part. The moral of the story is if you don't show up, that doesn't happen.
The genius of this is Jake recorded the exact same story without prodding either of you on this topic.
No.
Not 10 fucking minutes ago.
No.
And now we're going to run Jake's version of the story back to back. This is awesome.
Did that really just happen? Come on. I swear to God, in my life, no conversation, nothing with Jake, other than it's obviously a massive story for both. That is fucked up. That's amazing. If
we're going to get to run these back to back. The audience is going to get to hear your versions, Jake's version, literally back to back. That's fucking awesome. Dude, congrats on all the success this year. You guys are all over the place and just killing it. And dude, thank you so much for taking time and coming on Promoter 101 for our 100th.
Well, now you got to show up and come to Lock-In next year. I'll see you in the Jerry Forest. Peace, brother.
From Rocks Off, the great Jake Szufnarowski's in the house. What's up?
Oh, dangerous, Danny.
Danny Steinberg, thank you for the call, for having me on your 100th episode. I'm very honored.
Oh, dude, it wouldn't be the same without you.
Oh, God bless you, Danny. And Happy New Year.
The Jew New Year is here for us all. Hey, speaking of dipping apples in honey, do you have a great story for us that we can all have a little taste of?
I do, and it involves myself and Mr. Peter Shapiro.
Sheppy!
Sheppy! Between the Wetlands and the Brooklyn Bowl, Peter was making his living as a film director, and he made a 3D concert film for the band we all know and love, U2. And that film was premiering at the Grand Palais Theater at the Cannes Film Festival. And his wife was supposed to be his plus one, but they had recently had their daughter, Roxy, and Rebecca Shapiro decided not to go as his plus one. So Pete hit me up and said, will you want to walk the red carpet with me at the Cannes Film Festival for the premiere of my 3D U2 film? And I was like, hell yeah. But it was only a week before the festival, and I was like, all right, let me check out flights. So I looked up flights, and wouldn't you know it, last-minute flights during the film festival are almost impossible to get. So I pulled out a map, and I took a look at the surrounding cities, and I realized, okay, I can get cheap flights to Milan. So I flew to Milan overnight, woke up in Milan, Googled motorcycle rental joints, went and got myself a beautiful BMW R1200 GS, asked the guy which way to France, and he said, just you go down the motorway till you get to Genoa and then make a right and stay along the coast. And that's exactly how he said it to me. So that's what I did. I didn't even have a map. He just pointed me to the interstate, or whatever they would call it there in Italy. And I did what he said, and I just took it till it ended at the Mediterranean in Genoa and made a right. And I spent 3 days just winding my way along the Mediterranean coast, the Italian and French Riviera, stopping for a little glass of wine here and there, checking out the ocean, having a little Italian food. This was back in 2007 when Bush was president. So whenever anybody asked me where I was from, I would tell them Toronto, and I would get a thumbs up because, God forbid, I would admit that I was from New York. And I only had one set of instructions, and that was I had to get to this particular hotel by 5 o'clock on the day of the screening to pick up my ticket that would get me into the VIP pre-party and then onto the red carpet with Shapiro. Shapiro told me, do not miss the 5 o'clock cutoff at this hotel to get your tickets, or else there's no way we're going to be able to connect. You'll never get into the party. So, of course, I made it. I was making it just in the nick of time. You know, I stopped in Monte Carlo and rode my motorcycle around the streets of the famous racecourse track. Didn't even have time to hit the casino there. But I finally made it to Cannes, and I was in the town, and I could see the hotel, and I was just stuck in traffic. It was probably about 4:30, so I had about 30 minutes, and hotel looked to be about, a mile or two away, and I was just trying to inch through traffic, and then the next thing I know, bam, I get hit from behind, thrown over the handlebars of my motorcycle while stopped in traffic, and just went crashing to the ground. Like, took a minute to get my senses and figure out what had happened. I just found myself on the street, and I got up slowly, and the guy had gotten out of his car who had rammed me from behind. He just really hadn't been paying attention. And I saw my motorcycle on the ground. A guy was walking his baby with his wife in a stroller, and he came over and he helped me pick the motorcycle up, and I took my helmet off, and I just started screaming at the guy, like, what the fuck is wrong with you? The guy didn't speak any English, and he just kept saying, Policia, 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 and then pointing down the road to some police that were directing traffic about 100 yards down. And I kind of got my senses together and realized, if the police come over and start questioning me, I'm the guy without a motorcycle license, without a European motorcycle license, on a rental bike that I probably barely have the paperwork for because I picked it up out of a shady garage. I was like, I don't need any part of this. I checked out the bike. It started up okay. Just there are some turn signals and mirrors broken. I just got right back on the bike, zipped my way through traffic, ended up getting to the hotel at about 2 minutes to 5. When I walked into the hotel, walked into the suite where I was picking up the tickets, and basically collapsed in shock and started shaking. And the beautiful women who were assisting Pete in his premiere took wonderful care of me, got me some water. I went outside, got back on my bike with the ticket, made it to Shappy's hotel to change into my tuxedo, and made it just in the nick of time to have a glass of champagne with Pete at the VIP party, and then walk down the red carpet for the premiere of the film, where U2 made a surprise performance on the steps of the Grand Palais Theater. We watched the premiere. Prince Andrew gave it a standing ovation. Then we went to the after party where, of course, I met Kid Rock, ended up partying with him back on his yacht until the sun rose, doing all sorts of things that are probably illegal even in France. Got about 2 hours sleep and then got right back on my bike and tried to head back to Milan. And that, my friends, is how you do a trip to the Cannes Film Festival. And that is my Promoter 101 100th anniversary episode war story.
Only you would have a bike accident, blow it off, and still go party with Kid Rock and Shappy, and then get back on a bike again and drive back through the countryside. You're insane. The great Jake. Thank you, man. Nothing but love. Thank you for being here.
God bless Danny.
Andy Gensler from OBG Polestar Venues Now. Promoter 101 is the bomb. Congratulations on your 100th anniversary. You rule and are completely indispensable for our industry.
This is the halfway point of the 100th episode of Promoter 101. And no, you did not just hear a repeat of the same two stories. That story, both stories were told by Jake Szufnarowski from Rocks Off. The Brooklyn Bulls, Peter Shapiro. Those are two stories told independently about the same thing there. How about that, Dan?
Look, so I guess it really depends. Are you an episode half over kind of guy or an episode half left kind of guy? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good, Dan. This is a great stroll down some memory lane here, remembering a lot of great interviews that these people delivered for the podcast previously. And Dan, did you know that we've appeared at more conferences than any other podcast in the world to date?
Is that true?
It absolutely is not, but we have been at South by. But we've been at South by Southwest. We've been at the Western Arts Alliance. That's WA. We've been at Canadian Music Week. IAVM, that's IAVM's Venue Connect in Toronto this year. We've been at AIBA multiple times at Aspen Live, ILMC in London, Polestar, and very soon to come, we're going to be at Billboard this November. So maybe it's true, Dan.
I wonder if there's some fact technician out there like checking that shit like NFL style. You know, they've officially appeared at more conferences than any other podcast in the world.
I'm sure there are people out there fact checking us every day, Dan. We're just going to choose not to listen to them.
Well, we never claim to be real news.
That's true. We're not fake news either, though. Let's be clear on that.
No, we at least believe our bullshit when we put it out there.
That's true. And how about it? If you're all ready for a second half of the 100th episode of Promoter 101, hashtag Pro 101 turns 100.
Hey, Dan. Hey, Luke. It's Brian Hill from CAA in Nashville. Congrats on number 100. I try to learn one thing every week by listening to the podcast, and that means I've learned 100 things from you by listening, except, of course, if you apply the 15% promoter profit model to the podcast, in which case I've only learned 85 things. All the same, congrats. Keep on going.
Back to the podcast. We're welcoming Ross Schilling from Factor 2. Thank you so much for taking time and joining us on this special day.
Yeah, man. Thanks for including me, and congratulations on your 100th podcast.
Now, you're coming off one of the biggest shows you've ever put together on clearly Leonard Skinner's biggest tour ever. This farewell tour is insanely successful. Jacksonville, man, is like the biggest of big for this thing. Like, you guys went stadium big.
It was a pretty special night. You know, that weekend, believe it or not, kind of also was the 20th anniversary of myself and Ken Levitan working with the band. So that was pretty cool. But we decided back in early March that we needed to do something special in their hometown of Jacksonville, Florida. And, you know, what do you do? And it's, you know, Jacksonville is not, it's the biggest city in America, but it's not the biggest population base. Shows can be challenging in that marketplace, but we went big and we found a great partner with the Jacksonville Jaguars and SMG. And they came to the table and said, hey, we want to do something right with Skinner, their hometown band, and let's put something together. And the idea was, hey, how do we wedge this thing in there before the Jaguars, you know, coming off last year's AFC championship run and putting a celebration together to celebrate Leonard Skinner and also a little bit of the Jaguars and their accomplishments as well. So it was pretty monumental. And for me, with the band, it was the biggest show we've done. I think it was 47,000 people there. We had obviously our friends came out, Kid Rock, Jason Aldean, Charlie Daniels Band, Marshall Tucker Band, and Blackberry Smoke. So it was really kind of a stadium festival show. So it was really special.
And anytime you go in Florida this late in the year, you're always playing with weather.
Start of hurricane season, yeah. Anytime a lightning strike happens near an NFL stadium or really any venue, you know, within 8-10 miles, they're going to shut it down. And we had two that happened during that show, which delayed Skinner's performance an hour and actually cut Kid Rock's set short. Honestly, the fans stuck it out. The show started at 3 o'clock, and I think Skinner, the last note, played around 10 after midnight and had a little fireworks spectacular afterwards, but I swear I don't think anyone left that stadium. They were there from start to finish and were stoked to see Lynyrd Skynyrd and be part of that historical night. So it was special.
Dude, well done, and congrats on the success of that.
Man, thank you so much. And congratulations to you guys, too, on your 100th podcast, man. Glad to be a part of it.
Thanks, brother. We are joined by one of the coolest independent promoters in the world. I could only be talking about IMP's Seth Hurwitz. Welcome back to the podcast, my friend.
Yeah, well, we can't say that for too much longer because I'm getting old, man. 60. Can you believe this? How did this happen?
Put your head down and just started promoting shows, and before you knew it, you were fucking 60, man.
We don't know what comes first, death or tomorrow, So I'm living today.
Well, you've opened a new venue since we talked last.
I know, and that was a year ago already, and it's like, boom, a year later. I can't believe this.
When you were just a young pup of 59. So how are things going at Anthem?
I am having a blast, actually. Botch was in town the other day. You remember Botch? He asked me, being the fellow cynic that he is, he said, so how often do you come down here? Expecting me to say not very often, but I actually go to the Anthem pretty much all the time because it's a lot of fun. I love going there.
So your favorite new bar to hang out at?
What's weird is it makes the 930 Club seem really small. When I go to the 930 now, it's like it's tiny, and my little balcony that is where I watch the show from at the 930 is like a airplane bathroom or something. It's weird. So the 930 is rather intimate, as it turns out.
It's pretty cool. I mean, you've got your club, you've got your bigger ballroom setting, and now you've got your amphitheater. You kind of have the clear runway all the way through the market now.
A year ago, I was talking a good game, and I was telling everyone, it's going to be the greatest venue in the world. And I was sort of, to be honest, kind of bluffing it, just hoping that it was decent and it can better deliver something here.
Fake it till you make it, huh?
It turns out it's better than I had hoped, actually. So I'm pretty happy, and it's got the vibe. I was hoping somehow that we would have the vibe. So, what is the vibe? The vibe is, to use that horrible cliche, secret sauce, but it's got that vibe. It's got the thing. It's got the, when people go to the 930, and it's the thing you can't repeat. It's the thing other than the four walls. It's, people copy the 930 design. In fact, someone famously copied it right in my own town. But it's not the 930. You can't copy it. It's really the people that work there. I get up, if we win an award, and I get up and thank everyone, although I don't really go to these awards things much anymore. But if I do, and I thank people, I always say it's the people that work there. It's my people. And I don't mean that. That's not a cliche. It really is. That's who the club is. It's the people that work there. And so that's who works at the Anthem. It's all these people from the 930 and Merriweather and all my places. And so it is the same vibe. And, when the Foo Fighters finally went on stage for the first show and there were 6,000 people bopping, and it looked like the 930 times 5, which is what it was, and we did it. It was the vibe. It was the thing. It was 6,000 seat club with arena tech. So it's crazy.
What's your favorite place to personally watch a show?
It was the 930, but I have to say it's the Anthem now because everybody's so happy there. Every time I walk in the place, it's still very, very exciting. The audience, when they walk in, it's exciting. When I walk backstage, the bands are excited. So right now, I have to say that's very exciting. But going home to the 930, that's still home. So then again, Merriweather. Merriweather this year, people have been telling me how much they love it. I don't know. I'm really enjoying going to shows these days, I have to say. I thought I was burned out and done, but evidently I'm not. So you people aren't rid of me yet.
Seth, thank you so much for joining us for our 100th anniversary show. Can't thank you enough.
Congratulations, Dan. Who'd have thought you'd become an institution? I thought you were like the new upstart. But like, how long after New Year's are you allowed to say Happy New Year's? It's like, how long till you're not an upstart anymore?
Hopefully for another 10 minutes at least.
Well, 100th show. I don't know.
NS2's operator, Darin Lashinsky, in the house. Darin, thank you for joining us for this special occasion.
Thank you for including me, and happy 100th.
It's great to have you back. You got a story for us?
I do have a story. My story is about Aretha Franklin, rest her soul, the greatest female vocalist of all time, in my opinion, who I will miss dearly. But as I've said to everyone in my office and everyone that I've talked to about her passing, that she's left us with an amazing legacy of music that will live on forever. So my story is about Aretha Franklin. And Dan, as I know you had the opportunity to promote many dates with her over the years, so did I.
And the story that comes to mind is one of the first dates I did with her was in 2005 at the Louisville Palace. And for those who didn't get a chance to work with her, the story was that she would take about 50% of her pay in cash to pay out her band and crew each night. And so as a promoter, you would have to deliver that cash.
In person? In
person to her, correct. So it afforded me, and I know you as well, and others, the opportunity to spend a pretty decent amount of time with her one-on-one in her dressing room while she's counting the money. After the first show that I did with her, I realized, well, boy, this is an amazing opportunity to sit and have a conversation with Aretha Franklin, because it was 20, 30 minutes most of the time while she at some point got around to counting 30,000 plus in cash. So in 2005 in Louisville, it was my opportunity to pitch her on coming to Nashville. She had not played Nashville in many, many years. I'd made a number of offers, and I was told time and time again that the problem was we were trying to route it with Atlanta, and the only thing that they could see that was, or the thing that was holding us back and holding her back from coming to Nashville was that she traveled by bus and she was afraid of traveling through mountains. So I took the opportunity in person in Louisville to explain to her that if we booked a show in Atlanta, she could go through Birmingham, and it would be about an hour longer, but she could go the long way and avoid going over Monteagle in Chattanooga, which is what probably scared her about the trip. In that pitch, I told her that all of the Nashville music community, especially female vocalists, and name-checked Martina McBride, Faith Hill, who she eventually, I guess, worked with, but they would all be there to see her. And how amazing would this be to play the Ryman Auditorium and have all these vocalists that she's influenced at this show. So 5 years later, 2010, if my dates are correct, was the first date that I promoted her in Nashville at the Ryman Auditorium. Of course, sold-out show. We did many more sold-out shows with her at the Ryman after that. And Martina McBride was absolutely there with John McBride. I don't remember if Faith Hill was there, but just reflecting back on the idea of it was such a unique situation to have the opportunity to make a pitch directly to an artist and give them an angle for this is how you can get here if you're afraid to go this direction. And 5 years later, we did it.
So what you're saying is you played the long game.
Yes, it was well worth it.
The great Aretha Franklin gone too soon. Thank you so much, Darin, for taking time and sharing that story with us and being with us on our 100th episode.
Again, congratulations and thanks for including me.
I'm Ollie Rosenblatt from Sembla, congratulating my boys Luke and Steiny Baby for their 100th episode of Promoter 101. Show me love, baby.
Here we go again. Steve Martin here to celebrate our 100th episode. Steve, welcome back to the podcast.
It's an honor to be here for the 100th podcast. Who knew you would have made it this long, Dan? We're very proud of you. Do you go to syndication now? Is this like TV where you can syndicate it now?
Yeah, I guess I'm going to have to check with my agent.
That's right. That's right. So you were saying that you like old stories about stars, old Springsteen stories.
Oh, I'd love a Springsteen story, especially a vintage one.
I'd already seen him open to Chicago at Madison Square Garden because my girlfriend at the time was a big Chicago fan. After Terry Kath died, I kind of lost interest, but we went to see it. And this cool band opened with this tall black saxophone player, David Sanchez, I believe, was still in the band then. I was like, these guys are great. Went out and got an album, became a fan. So he was playing C.W. Post on Long Island, and I'd already started getting involved in the concert committee at New Paltz. And the guy that ran the concerts, Richie Favola, I don't forget his name, very nice guy. I had met him a couple of times and called him to see I was heading down for Christmas time. The show was in December. My cousin was going to Stony Brook, and I had some friends that were going to come to the show. And I got down there early, met my cousin about 5 o'clock to go find my friend who ran the concerts at CW Post. I walked in backstage, asked around for him, wasn't around. Just then the tour manager came in. This was way before George Travis, and wanted to clear everybody out of the room because they were going to sound check. It was about 10 degrees out, and there were, 2,500 people outside. And I said to my cousin, I don't want to stand outside. They're going to put us on the back of a line. It's freezing out. Let's go find something to do here, and so we don't look like we're out of place. So they had a film projector booth where on top of it they had 2 spotlights. and the ladder going up to it. And I said to my cousin, get up the ladder. We're going to go up the ladder, and we're going to play with the spotlights. He goes, I don't know how to play with a spotlight. I said, I don't either, but I don't want to get thrown out of the building. So climb the ladder. We go up on this thing. I hand my cousin an extension cord. I pick an extension cord up. He goes, what am I going to do with this? I said, just roll it and unroll it until somebody and hope nobody asks us to turn on the spotlight, because I have no idea how to turn on a spotlight. Springsteen and the band come out. They're tinkering around. And right in the front of the orchestra, they had taped off the first 15 rows, the best seats. And I'm just watching this, and Bruce finally ambles out, and he points to the thing. I can't really hear him, even though it's not that far. And then all of a sudden, my friend Rich comes out. They wanted the concert chairperson, like, why are these seats blocked off? And he starts saying how Born to Run, I think, was just going to come out, or maybe just out. And he said, no, all of Columbia Records are coming out tonight, and they asked us to hold these seats. And Bruce said loudly, fuck that, they can sit in the back. And he jumped off the stage and tore the tape off all the seats. And he said, all those people are waiting out front in the cold. They can sit up here. The record company can sit in the back. And I thought, this was the coolest guy I've ever seen.
How righteous is that? Wow.
And I'm just standing there winding and rewinding the same extension cord for like 40 minutes, right? With my cousin. They get through the sound check. They open the doors. I said to my cousin, wait a couple of minutes. We can't just be seen quiet. The spotlight guys just sat in the first row. We can't do that.
Gotta be kind of discreet about this.
So we waited for some people to come in, sat down in the third row, and it was a kind of a revelatory experience, because I'd already seen a ton of shows before. I'd been in high school. I'd seen the Stones and Zeppelin and Stevie Wonder and Ike and Tina. I'd seen a ton of shows, but that was the first one, and that was due, I found out subsequently, to a guy that became a good friend of mine, Mark Brickman, really contributing theatrical lighting, true theater lighting to rock and roll. And it made an enormous difference in the quality of the show. And that's where they recorded Santa Claus is Coming to Town, actually. That gets played every year.
Thank you so much for helping us celebrate our 100th episode.
Thanks for having me on your 100th birthday party here.
And we've got Vector Management's Brian Penix in the house. Brian, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You got a story for us for our 100th?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the good old days and the good old days of being a fan before we joined this crazy business. I got a good ticket scaling story to share with you, Dan.
Let's hear it, my friend. Bring it.
All right. Well, if you remember back in the days before the internet was a thing, I actually went to the ticket counter to buy tickets. I mean, we're talking way back in the day. And I was going to see the Rolling Stones at Vanderbilt Stadium. And I remember going in and looking at the ticket scaling map and actually having a discussion with the person about where the tickets were and how much they cost. And I think in those days, if I remember correctly, to sit on the field, it was about $100, and to sit in the lower bowl, it was also $100. In the upper bowl and the sides of the stage were $50.
This is like Bridges to Babylon tour time frame?
That is exactly correct. Bridges to Babylon tour. You are right on the money. And I remember asking the ticket person, I said, hey, where are those side of stage tickets? And they said, oh, they're third row. And I said, well, what side of stage? And they said, well, it would be house right, stage left. And I remember thinking in the back of my brain, well, that's Keith Richards' side. And on top of that, I've seen so many Rolling Stones concert footage where Mick Jagger just runs from one end of the stage to the other. And so I was just sitting there thinking, you know what? Screw it. I'll take those tickets. Sure enough, show up at the show. There's a screamer deck right in front of me. Sure enough, Keith Richards took 3 solos right in front of me, and I even got to high-five Mick Jagger during the show. And I paid for the cheapest seats in the house.
Awesome, dude.
Another story was when I first started in this business, I went to work for AC Entertainment. And believe it or not, one of my first big gigs was the original Bonnaroo Music Festival. Throughout this whole and I grew up, and one of the reasons why I really got into live business is I grew up going to shows. The bands that I really were into, and I still am to this day, were jam bands. And I love The Dead, and I love Fish, I love Widespread Panic, I love all that stuff. And I remember when I worked the first Bonnaroo, I helped out the festival publicist quite a bit. And I asked him for a favor. I said, man, if there's Bob Weir and Phil Lesh were playing the first Bonnaroo Music Festival. And I asked the publicist who was setting up all the press conferences, if there was any way he could introduce me to Phil Lesh and Bob Weir. And he said he would right after the press conference. And so fast forward to the actual festival itself, I was working my tail off out on site. And I looked down at the time and I realized, oh crap, the Phil and Bobby press conference is going on right now. I got to get there or I'm gonna miss my window. And I was on my little golf cart and I went flying backstage, parked my golf cart, ran in, hoping to meet my heroes. And I get in there and the press conference was over. No Phil, no Bob, no nothing. And I've been working my butt off all weekend. I was so looking forward to meeting those guys. And I literally just sat there with my head down. So disappointed. I looked down and on my belt, my walkie-talkie wasn't there. And I realized, oh crap, I must have left it on my golf cart. So I go running back to my golf cart, and who's sitting on my golf cart but Trey Anastasio.
Wow.
So I went from being like as bummed as you could be to as happy as you can be in about 2 minutes time. And I got to sit there and have a 5-minute conversation with Trey, just about everything, And so that was a great start to my musical career.
Thank you so much for joining us for our 100th episode.
Hey, thanks for having me, and congratulations to 100 episodes to Promoter 101.
Joining us right now from Redlight Management, the iconic Stuart Ross. Stuart, welcome back to the podcast.
Hi, congratulations on your 100th show.
Thank you, my friend. You possibly have a little story for us?
So, on Lollapalooza, way back when, we're not talking about the Chicago Lollapalooza, but the tour back in the 90s.
The original.
The original. One year, we had Courtney Love, Hole, and Sinead O'Connor. Now, I was very excited to have Sinead O'Connor because she had an angelic voice. She was an angelic performer. I was very excited, but things started going badly very quickly. She didn't understand the concept of time zone changes and showed up to a show that she thought was on Central Time, but was on Eastern Time, and came in, actually arrived at the venue halfway through her set, demanded to do the whole set. Production manager said, no, we can't really extend the show, and there was all sorts of craziness going on. But one day, we were in Chicago, we had a day off, and I got a call from Ted Gardner. Ted was one of the producers and the manager of Jane's Addiction. Ted was not on the road with us at that time. And Ted called and said, hey, a friend of mine just called me and said that Sinead O'Connor had been seen arriving in Dublin. He said he saw it in Melody Maker. I had seen Sinead the day before, so I had absolutely no idea. So I called the tour manager. I said, hey, how's your girl? He said, she's fine. She has a bit of the stomach flu, but she's fine. I said, okay. So Ted calls me back. He says, dude, I think she's in Ireland. I called the tour manager a second time. I said, hey, there's rumors going around. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. She has, she's feeling a little under the weather, but everything's fine. The third time I called him, I said, is anything happening? Is there anything you want to tell me? Well, it turned out she did have sort of a little problem. She was pregnant. She got up from her hotel in Chicago, went to the airport with just her passport, no luggage, nothing. Just took a cab to the airport, got on a plane, went to Dublin, didn't tell anybody. So the poor tour manager is obviously flipping out, but she actually just got up and walked off the tour. Next day, we're trying to figure out what we're going to do, how we're going to tell the public this. And I'm walking around the site the next day, and I run into Courtney Love. She pulls me aside. She says, hey, I got to tell you something about Sinead O'Connor. She's crazy. I said, Courtney, coming from you, I consider that expert testimony. And that's that story.
Thank you so much, Stuart, for joining us for our 100th episode.
Anytime. Congratulations. I'll talk to you at 1,000.
This is Ted Heineck with AC Entertainment. Shout out to Dan and Luke. Congrats on 100. Can't wait to see what the next 100 look like. You guys are doing a great job. Legends in the biz.
From Atlantic Records, joining us now, the great Harlan Frey. Welcome to the show, my friend.
What's up, Steiny?
I can't wait to hear what you're going to tell us.
I do have one story that I was thinking about that kind of brings me back to my childhood. It's kind of not something that I've really talked about to many people, but my father used to be a fairly prominent player in the biz back in the day. He managed Elvis Costello and Graham Parker and a few others in the mid-'70s. He also ran Stiff Records in the U.S. during that same time, and he booked Pink Floyd starting in the early 70s with Metal and Dark Side of the Moon, Animals, Wish You Were Here, Through the Wall. So you can imagine some of the cast of characters who would come over our house, which meant quite often Harlan sleeping on the couch because there's just not enough rooms to go around. So I used to complain to my parents nonstop, like, why do I have to sleep on the couch again? Why do I have to? Come on, let them sleep on the couch. And my mom kept saying to me, Har, one day you're going to get over it. One day you'll appreciate, all the people who have been in our house and your time with them. So, I was too young to really get the gravity of who was around and who my father was working with. And to be honest, it never fazed me and I didn't really care so much. But fast forward to 94 when I was going to University of Vermont. I think I was a junior at the time. It was during this year that Pink Floyd had put out the Division Bell record. And Steve O'Rourke, who managed the Floyd at the time, called my pops to see if he'd be game to consult on the tour. And of course, he said yes. And we attended some shows throughout the tour. But it was not until the final show at Foxborough Stadium, the final show of the tour, I realized maybe I should have appreciated some of that time, having to sleep on the couch as a little kid back in the day. It was literally like, it was the ultimate VIP experience you could ever imagine. So we get to Foxborough, kind of a shitty night, raining, hanging out at the soundboard. Actually, before that, we're hanging out backstage, people knocking on the door nonstop trying to get in. I'm just sitting on the couch watching everything unfold. David Gilmour walks in with this crazy device called a GPS. He's like, yeah, this new GPS, I don't know what it does, but I just got one and it's pretty cool. So I remember everything that happened, and Steve Miller was knocking on the door, wanting to say hi, and just everybody was around. And so we get to the show, start watching. It's just A-level, incredible. We're watching. And the last song, my dad says, all right, let's go to the bus. I don't know anything that's going on. He's just telling me where to go. So he's like, let's go to the bus right now. They're going to come off literally 30 seconds after the last song, which I think was Red Like Hell. So I sit down, midway through the bus. There must be 50 seats in this charter. And out of all the seats that Dave Gilmour could have sat in, he sits next to me.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I'm like this little wimpy college kid. I'm nobody. But he's like, I remember when you were the little boy. And we proceeded to talk with, of course, there was this 30 state cop cars giving us a ride, escort to the Four Seasons Hotel. I felt like we were royalty. He took such an interest in talking to me, literally. I didn't ask him anything about music. I didn't ask him about the show. He was just talking to me as if I was his equal. It was like an incredible moment for me to realize that we're all human beings. We're all people. You can be one of the biggest superstars in the world and be humble and kind and cool and real. And so we had an amazing time, at least I did, going back to the hotel. And then from there, we split up, go to our rooms, get ready for some dinner. And then I sit down with my dad. It's just me and my dad. And then Michael Cole sits down. So I'm an aspiring promoter in Burlington, putting on free festivals, fighting my way through, trying to make it. And Michael sits down, having a conversation. You're just totally normal, cool, humble, amazing human being. So that was that. And then, we were being asked to come over to the lobby because the lobby was shut down to all the public. And Nick, Rick, Dave all got together and started giving us a private performance with all the crew, friends and family. It was one of the most incredible experiences that I'll ever remember in my whole life. And it kind of made my whole childhood, made me, I was pissed at myself just not appreciating, the band members coming over and having funny stories. It just was a really, really special night.
Harlan Frey, born and bred to be in rock and roll. That moment of realizing how lucky you were to be there at that moment as a fan of music. Dude, thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, thank you, Steiny.
100th episode of Promoter 101, and it just keeps getting better. We've got Andrew Druskin from Ticketfly, Eventbrite, whatever they call themselves this day. Dude, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming back.
Thanks, Dan. Hey, but before we start, one procedural element. Shouldn't you be celebrating the 101st show of Promoter 101? Just an observation. Dan, it feels like I've known you for 100 years, which is a good thing. We've done at least 100 panels together over the years. I know you've sent me 100 inane holiday cards and needless Steiny tchotchkes.
But I know what your favorite is.
You sure do. I can go on, but rather than do that, why don't I just say congrats to you on your 100th show of Promoter 101. It's amazing. I love to listen to it. And in closing, I will say I'm delighted to have been a guest on the show. I'm delighted that we've been friends for all these years. And I'm especially delighted that you decided not to punch me in the face at South by Southwest in 2011. So thank you for that, Dan. Good luck. Best of luck in the future.
Never in the face, Andrew. Never in the face.
All right, man.
Jason Miller, one of my favorite guests and one of my dearest friends, back on the podcast for our 100th. Welcome back to the show, dude.
Thank you so much, Steiny. It's great to be back.
You got a story you could share with our listeners for the 100th?
I wanted to give you a little story about probably one of the more defining moments in my college career. And I think there's a lot of people out there that listen and say, well, how do we get started in this business? And a lot of us got our start on college boards. And, I was no different at the University of Oregon.
Go Ducks!
Go Ducks. Yeah, 2-0 so far, so I'm feeling good about that. And I worked out of the EMU, the Student Union Building, the EMU Cultural Forum. And coincidentally, I did that for 3 years, followed by Adam Zaks, another fine product of University of Oregon, and before me, Chris Monlux and Lord Jacoby from University of Oregon. But I digress. So the student board, and 3 years I ran this thing and did a bunch of concerts, and most of them were on campus. But working with the university to get usable space was very difficult. So I was a trailblazer even then to move my events off of campus, and I routinely rented out the ballroom of the Eugene Hilton Hotel, located right next to the Holt Center in downtown Eugene. So we did a bunch of great things there, like Primus, Fish, Blues Traveler. But I want to tell you the story of Hunter S. Thompson. I helped bring him to Eugene to give a speaking engagement. And the ballroom of the hotel holds 1,500 people, sold out. And I had a colleague that handled all of the speaking engagements for the student union. I did the larger concerts. There were a number of people on that board that had different functions. And he said, I've never done anything this big. Can you help me out? And I said, sure. Because I'd already done 5 or 6 shows at this venue. We put this event together and sell all the tickets. It comes to the day of the event. Hunter S. Thompson flies into town. We're getting close to showtime, and we have no idea where he is. We're starting to freak out because we have no contact with him. We have no contact with my colleague who picked him up at the airport and apparently had taken him straight to a bar and been, chaperoning him all over Eugene. The crowd is restless and the venue is full. But I had some help. Another person that we've lost, unfortunately, Ken Kesey, great author, also in his time a professor and merry prankster. So Ken Kesey and Ken Babs, one of the other merry pranksters, were there, and they showed up in the refurbished Further bus that in the early 90s, the original Further bus from the, On the Bus and Neil Cassidy and all that was actually rotting out in Ken's backyard, but they made a new one and they come rolling into this gig in this crazy bus. So Ken Kesey says, I got you. We will stall the crowd. Great. So Ken Kesey and Ken Babs get on stage and talk about the fact that Hunter's not there yet, but he's on the way. Have no fear. They start telling some stories about the old days, about the Grateful Dead, about Neil Cassidy, etc. And this is dragging on now for about 15 minutes. The crowd is not into this at this point. And somebody in the crowd stands up and says, hey, I didn't pay my money to see you guys talk. I paid to see Hunter S. Thompson. Now, where is he? Ken Kesey just just that quick is like, hey, somebody ought to give you your $20 back and you can get the fuck out of here. And the guy in the audience said, okay. And then literally in real time, Ken Kesey puts down the microphone, jumps off the stage, walks out to the gentleman in the audience, takes his wallet out, hands the guy $20, and the guy walks out the door of the venue and leaves. And all of us are sitting there with our mouths open going like, holy shit, I can't believe what we just saw. And it's no sooner does that happen than who comes barreling in through the back door but Hunter S. Thompson. And I remember it like it's yesterday. He's wearing a ball cap, he's wearing a horizontal striped shirt, and he's got stereo connector cable hanging around his neck. And we put him on stage. You can't understand anything that this guy is saying. He is wasted beyond words, just mumbling, and you every now and then you would hear like Denver Broncos or Aspen, Colorado, and none of it makes any sense. And this is going on for about 45 minutes, and then he takes a pause. He's very lucid, and all of a sudden it's like he's a normal person, and he says, I've been speaking to you all now for about 45 minutes, and I can't believe not one person in the audience has offered me any drugs. And at that moment, it was the most incredible thing I may have ever seen in my career, where literally joints flying through the air, people throwing joints at the stage, people walking up to the stage and dropping bags of powder that I don't know what that could or couldn't be. This, goes on for probably a minute and a half or 2 minutes, and he sort of gathers up all of these things that come flying at him, and he goes right back into indiscernible diatribe about we don't even know what. Show ends, everybody leaves, and me and my buddy literally get on the bus, the further bus, with Hunter S. Thompson, Ken Babbs, Ken Kesey, a bunch of their friends, and roll back to Ken Kesey's house in Springfield, sat around a huge breakfast table. There's probably 6 of us at this breakfast table. I'm sitting next to Hunter S. Thompson. He's pouring me wild turkey, and to this day, I cannot tell you how I got home.
Man, thank you so much for taking time and being here on our 100th. This is so special to me.
Congratulations. Are you kidding? It's my pleasure. It's all of the success in the world to you, to Luke, to the whole team, and I'm just thrilled to be a part of it.
Well, we can't wait for your special guest hosting episode because we know it's going to be over the top. We can't wait to see who your guests are going to be. I know that's going to be amazing when we get that all together.
I'm coming for the takeover. I'm going to give you a run for your money, Steiny. Here we go.
Jason Kupperman here at Paradigm, wishing you guys future success on the next 100 shows. You've helped my commute in the mornings and my late night trips back from shows. Can't wait to hear what you guys have next. Learned a lot, had lots of laughs, and nothing but the best.
Hey, if you're following us online, comment on something, feel free to hashtag
Pro101 turns 100.
When you think of AEG Las Vegas, the smiling face of Max Sadler is always the thing that pops in your head. Welcome to the podcast, Max.
Thanks very much, Steiny.
Dude, I know it's been a tough week for you, and you're on the recovery and on the mend, heal from a little bit of an accident this past weekend, but you got a cool story for us you can share?
Yeah, man, it's just part of life. We always have our ups and downs, but definitely one of the ups in my career has been fulfilling a make-a-wish. We always in this business say that we're not here saving lives, and we're always here to provide a good time. And I was given the opportunity to meet a gentleman by the name of Cashel Gardner just before I believe it was his 19th birthday. Cashel has a condition called SMA, and him and his sister both actually have this condition. Very rare. Life expectancy of most people with this condition is, I believe, in their teens. Cashel actually just celebrated his 21st birthday with us over at Brooklyn Bowl. But one of my greatest memories in this business was when Cashel had the desire and a make-a-wish to meet with Adam Sandler. We had Adam Sandler over at the Joint doing Adam Sandler and Friends that weekend, which was Adam Sandler, Rob Schneider, Tim Meadows, Norm Macdonald, David Spade, and Kevin Farley. And just before the show started, we had Cashel come in and hang out in the green room and let Adam know that this was his make-a-wish. And Adam and all the guys spent literally 15 to 20 minutes with Cashel, who is basically bedridden and nonverbal, but they were able to communicate. These guys were such good guys that they were able to spend 15 minutes with this guy and make his dream come true. And since then, Cashel has also gone to some movie premieres with us, and I just feel like it's really great in our business to be able to have those special moments and make those wishes come true.
way to use your job to like help others. It's just such a rare thing is we're usually just, what's the bottom line? What's the break even? What can we make? And getting the chance to think about others. Well done, Max.
Absolutely. You know, working with Bobby Reynolds has really afforded me that opportunity. You know, we're involved with St. Jude's. We're involved with the Shriners. We're involved with Make-A-Wish, Do It for the Love. So, you know, we do a lot of philanthropic endeavors out of this office. And that's the highlights for me as a concert promoter, is to be able to be involved in those sort of experiences and witness it hands-on.
The wonderful Max Adler. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
100 episodes after the song was created, Tongue Bath, we have the founder and writer of that amazing theme song that gets stuck in your head that you either love him or you want to kill him. But Craig Newman, thank you so much for writing our song and joining us once again on the podcast. How you doing, buddy?
Steiny, I'd be in trouble if I didn't know you. You've got my heart, 100 eps. You are the man, 101. Mofo.
That's awesome.
Doing great. Life is good. It's a new year. I'm feeling like a new man.
Yes, happy Jew year.
Thank you very much. Lashana Tova.
What can you impart on our listeners for this most solemn of occasion?
Every now and again, I get a chance to work with someone who I consider to be an all-timer. And sometimes that person is in music, sometimes that person is in television or film, or perhaps behind the scenes as a writer. I remember a time when I had the chance to book one of my acting heroes, the one, the only, Mr. Al Pacino. And I had been tasked with finding a venue where Al could do his Evening with Al Pacino, where he basically takes you through his life and career, shows you the clips of his films, takes you behind the scenes as to what was happening when all of this went down. And when I was given that assignment, I was so excited, and I was able to get a really, really great gig on the books up in Reno, Nevada, the Pepper Mill. And I booked the gig, and when I was booking the gig, part of the deal was Mr. Pacino flies private. And it was the first time in my career that I negotiated a private plane. So I was already feeling pretty geeked out. I was feeling excited about booking a hero like Al Pacino, excited about the deal that I had put together, which was a massive deal, and excited about the private plane. On top of all that, Al's responsible agent, Betsy Berg, says to me, Al wants you to ride on the plane with him to the show. Okay.
Twist my arm.
Twist my arm. So when I came to the private airfield that day, it was the first time, that I'd ever been to a private airfield. It was going to be the first time that I'd ever flown private. It was going to be the first time that I actually met Al, even though I had done a lot of the work behind the scenes. I remember this day because it was drought. We had been having pretty heavy drought in Los Angeles, and it was the one day that it rained. And we arrived at the airfield, and Al was not there yet. It was Betsy, myself, a few of Al's friends, and we're sitting in the waiting area. They say, okay, why don't we go ahead and get on the plane? That way when the rain clears, we can take off immediately. So we said, yeah, Al's ETA is about a half hour or so. So we're all sitting on this private plane. And Betsy tells me to sit in the seat across from the jump seat where Al's going to sit. I'm like, you want me to sit across from Al? She's like, you have to get the full experience when you meet Al Pacino. Trust me. I said, okay. So I sit in the seat across from where Al will eventually sit. White SUV pulls on the tarmac. Al Pacino gets out of the car, comes onto the plane. Betsy says, Al, I'm so excited for you to meet Craig Newman, who put this all together for you. He looks at me, smiles, shakes my hand, and proceeds to launch into a 5-minute tirade about how upset he is that we didn't have the wherewithal to know that it was going to rain at that exact moment and book the flight for an earlier time. And when I tell you this guy is launched into a tirade, his voice, his face, his body, his mannerisms, everything you've ever seen in Scarface and Dog Day Afternoon and The Godfather and all these movies and Hoo-ah and all this stuff, it's all centered right at this moment. This man standing there for 5 minutes with his intent to bruise us all, right? And I'm just sitting there. Nobody says a word, right? He finishes after about 5 minutes. We all just sit in silence. We get off the plane. We go back inside to the waiting area to wait out the rain. And I swear to you, something clicks in this guy's head, and he becomes the nicest human being I've ever met. He's now all hugs and smiles and thank yous, and we never heard another word about the whole debacle with the weather and the flight. We got back on the plane. Sure enough, he sat across from me. Now I know why Betsy wanted me to sit across from him. He literally told some of the most unbelievable stories for the entire 45-minute flight. None of us even had to say a word. And we landed, and he actually had cracked a crown I arranged for a dentist for him when he arrived. He was super thankful about that. He went on to put on an incredible show to a sold-out house that evening, did the meet and greet afterwards, and my other client, Priscilla Presley, had actually flown in to see this show because she was building her own show and wanted to take away some ideas from Al's show. And for the rest of the night, myself and President of APA Jim Gosnell and some other guests sat at a restaurant and got to watch Al Pacino and Priscilla Presley tell stories for the entire night. I wound up getting my photo with everybody. I wound up getting hugs and high fives. And that was the one and only time I ever got to be with Al. But it is something that I will not soon ever forget when one of my heroes screamed in my face for 5 minutes.
Oh, how intimidating must have that been? An icon and a legend. It's cool that you got to spend enough time with him where you got the other side of that. What an amazing 100th show gift you've bestowed upon us. Thanks so much, dude.
If you're under the weather and want to see the sun, get a vitamin B12 shot of Promoter 101. Boop.
Hello, you have Brian Swanson from Paradigm Talent Agency on the line, congratulating Dan, Steinberg, and Luke on 100 episodes of Promoter 101, the most interesting and thought-provoking hour of chatter on the concert industry you will ever want to hear.
What an amazing run of interviews so far, and we've got one more to go. To close out this very special 100th episode of Promoter 101, we are going to start with the one guest that started it all for us back in October of 2016, Mr. Tom Ross.
Full circle, first to last, you gotta love Tom Ross. He's a legend, an icon, and it's just an honor to call him a friend. So grateful he took time to be on the podcast this week. It wouldn't be our 100th without looking back to our very first episode and possibly my favorite guest. The iconic Tom Ross is back with us. Thank you so much for being here again.
Well, I'm very happy to rejoin you. I didn't realize when I first did it, I knew I was talking to the professor of the new breed of promoter, but I didn't realize the impact and the amount of people that would follow. I didn't know if it would last a month, or who knew that you'd get to 100, you know? You kind of set the record for podcasts. But I'm happy to rejoin you. And as I said, when I first went on, nobody was doing podcasts. I didn't really know what it was about, but I'm very proud to see a lot of the people that I helped raise in the business and helped along their path who have been on the show and been one of your guests. What I'm most happy about is the fact that I looked at this as your followers are the people that are going to be finding the new acts and the new breed of concert attractions that will hopefully be headlining for years and years and years. And you're allowing them the insights of some of the hardships of beginning promotership. An isolated guy in a market against the big guys, David versus Goliath, has been an incentive to me to say, well, he wanted me to come back and tell a story, and I'm happy to do it. I was thinking about what could I tell? Everybody talks about their funny times, but kind of in the wake of, since you're based up north, kind of in the Nike fashion of just do it, even if it costs you everything. I thought maybe a story I had about one of my favorite acts, Bon Jovi, would be appropriate. Early to mid-'90s, John Bon Jovi and band were absolutely huge and still are, but they were killing it in Europe, and they were doing multiple dates in stadiums. And Chris Dalston was our guy who handled all our European booking, and we were dodging the Rolling Stones, who were also doing a stadium tour. And so we were kind of crisscrossing through Europe, and they would do 2 days and sometimes 3, and John Bon Jovi and band would do 2 or 3 in each market. I mean, that's how strong they were. They were doing multiple stadium dates, and we were enjoying great success, but we had one problem area, and that was Paris. For some reason, the Parisians just didn't get what John Bon Jovi was doing, didn't buy a lot of his records, and it was a real sore spot. And in the midst of, I don't know, probably a 14-truck, 100-personnel tour doing stadiums, we were capable of doing 4,000 seats in Paris. And that was a real dilemma and a bummer. We said, well, we could miss the market, or what should we do? It came to us that, there's an opportunity. Maybe what we should do is jump a step. If we play 4,000 and sell out, so what? It's just another act. And where do we come back to? Why don't we see if we can play with the Rolling Stones? They're doing 2 days. And if we play underneath the Rolling Stones, we'll come back to a base of 150,000 people and pick up where we are everywhere else in Europe. Sounded brilliant. I said, now who's going to tell John Bon Jovi this is what we want him to do without him saying, are you kidding me? And I was elected. I did go along with his attorney, who was kind of his quasi-manager, Jerry Edelstein, and we sat him down and said, look, this is a step backwards, but it's really an opportunity to step way, way, way forward. If we did it the old-fashioned way, we'd end up doing 4, and maybe we could end up coming back to an arena, but we need to really get this even across Europe so that you're not always plagued by Paris. So sure enough, John acquiesced, and he had to do, here we are with production and lights. He had to go on in the daytime. He had to reduce his 2.5-hour set down. I think they gave us a little, 75 minutes. It may have even been an hour. And John was he stepped up to the plate, and the band, we got to the day, it was exciting to be at a Stone show. And when their time came on stage, I came up on the stage with them, and it was probably 4:30 in the afternoon. Rain was threatening, and John started the set, and no one has to explain how good of a performer John and the band were. They went out, and he just did single hit after hit. He did every move in the book. The guy's got the magic looks. He's got the magic skin. He was working the crowd, and they just could care less. It was like standing there going, oh my God. And I'm standing on stage going, oh my God, they're just not buying into this. How terrible. What could I possibly say to them? And he worked it, and it just didn't go down. And then as he got to where he would be with the last few sets, I said, well, I'm going off the stage. And I knew I couldn't avoid him. I went and just stood at the bottom of the stairs of the stage. And I'm trying to think, what can I say to this guy? And when the set ended, he got polite applause, but it wasn't the roar that we expected and are used to. And he started heading down the stairs. He saw me, his eyes locked into mine, and he came up and he said, hi, I'm John Bon Jovi. I've sold 100 million records, and obviously not one of them here in Paris.
That was not where I thought you were going, man.
No, not where I thought we were going either. But I'll tell you this. I think within 10 minutes, rain broke out. Nobody left. They wanted to see the Stones. It was a Stones audience. But today he's as big as ever, all through Europe, including Paris. But that grand idea was just do it. Well, guess what? There are sometimes you have to eat it. And that was one where he didn't blame me, but it just didn't work. And as young promoters, if you believe in it, do it. If it's in your heart, make it happen and work your soul until it does happen. Because sometimes I made a lot of good decisions. That was one of the worst. I thought, everyone likes to talk about their proud moments. That wasn't one of the proudest moments, but at the same time, we did what was right. It should have worked. But Paris, we still have our issues with France.
That's awesome. I mean, it's not, but it's hilarious, looking back on it. Thank you so much for coming back to our 100th episode and treating us with the story. What a great experience to be able to share.
My pleasure. Good day to everybody, and I'll talk to you on the 200th.
This is Paul Lohr at New Frontier Touring. Hey, 100 in bowling? Not so hot. 100 shows and podcasts? Well done, gentlemen. Congratulations to Promoter 101 on your 100th episode.
That will do it. It's episode 100 of Promoter 101 in the books. A very special episode for both Dan and I. We have to give a huge thank you to everybody stuck with us that listened to this podcast. We love you. We appreciate you so much. Thank you for tuning in week after week, providing us with great feedback. The emails, the texts, the phone calls about what you heard here really means a lot to us. So thank you to everybody listening to Promoter 101. If you like something about this episode or a story you heard here and want to learn more about, you can hit Dan and I. We are at Steiny at promoter101.net.
Big thank you to all of our friends that took time for this week's show. This one was so special to us that everyone just came together and was so giving of their time and so supportive. So we want to thank all of our friends for that from the past 2 years, everyone that's helped us, and especially the listeners who actually listen to us. What the fuck is wrong with you people? No, seriously, thank you so much for listening and being so supportive of me and Luke. It means the world to us.
True words never been spoken, Dan. Thanks again to everybody for tuning in. And we are going to be back next week, turning the clock, episode 101 of Promoter 101. Some amazing interviews. We got some folks from Milwaukee. We got Matt Berenger and Gary Witt, Mark Solheim. That's the talent buyers from Milwaukee's Pabst Theater, Turner Hall, and Riverside Theater. Plus, we've got Kill the Eights, Aaron Rosen, talking about merchandise and a war story from our friend down in San Antonio at the Tobin Center, Mr. Aaron Zimmerman.
Not sure what else we could have done for you this week to have made this a better episode. I feel like we left it all on the field, Luke. So we're wishing all of you sold out shows for the weeks to come.
Cheers.
This fall, coming to a conference near you. Two legends meet face to face. Activists Bernie Cahill, Emporium presents Dan Steinberg, Billboard Live.
Bernie Cahill here. I'll be doing the keynote with Dan Steinberg at Billboard Live, Montage, Beverly Hills, November 13th.
Ba-da-ba-ba.